Chapter 372. Have you heard? The Qualifier Battle Royale. It's the first time I've seen this kind of duel mode. It's super interesting. Me too. I originally thought that we wouldn't be able to participate in this level of competition, but this Battle Royale. Maybe we'll be lucky enough to pass the qualifier. Do you want to participate? The goal is to pass. These days, Dake could always hear similar conversations when he went back and forth between the classroom and the dormitory. It wasn't just the boys. Even the girls seemed to be very interested in the qualifier battle royale. As the level of the duel increased, it had always been more and more formal. When had there ever been a mode that was more entertaining? Moreover, it was a mode that allowed you to compete on the same stage as the seniors. Even if you couldn't pass the qualifier, you would still be very happy just by participating. The majority of the juniors held this kind of thinking. 1 second to remember https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. On the contrary, the seniors were more restrained. Most of them had enough duel experience and knew that the strong were still strong no matter what environment they were in. The same was true for the weak. In contrast, the Easter egg plan didn't seem to have attracted as much discussion as the qualifier battle royale. This was actually beyond Dake's expectations. But the development of things couldn't be seen from the beginning. The Easter egg wasn't targeted at the Shungmalian Academy students. It was specifically targeted at the fans of the duelists. Being in the academy, Dake didn't have a good understanding of the outside world's response. As a matter of fact, as St. Marian's advertising campaign spread all over the world, especially after the release of the illustrated handbook of the popular magic elf, the Easter egg became a hot topic of discussion for people everywhere. In this era of the duel industry, the highly popular players and magic elves were really good at attracting fans. Their identity as duelists made them unable to be used as marketing targets, but magic elves didn't have this concern. For example, the White Dragon in Panduola was very popular among the people. This time, the Magic Elf illustration handbook was published in the newspapers, and the White Dragon was the main target of marketing. The Academy publicly revealed that in the batch of Easter eggs produced, there was only one living White Dragon model. This made the White Dragon model, which was still under construction, instantly become the object of the fans' scramble to get their hands on. There were still 2 weeks before Easter, and there were already people arguing over it. There was even a purchase price on the black market. All of a sudden, the Shungmalian Easter egg caused an uproar in every major city. The capital of the kingdom, eldest Princess Elisha, was very troubled recently. Ever since someone gave the eldest Prince Charles a disgusting idea through the Great Sage Daily, the eldest prince often visited the king and talked about how outstanding the son of the Grand Duke was, and how the son of the Earl was of the right age. He couldn't wait to marry off the eldest princess. The old king was born at an old age. Now that he was old, he had thoughts of abdicating. When he was young, he had spent too much energy in order to destroy the demon race. Even if he abdicated, it was a successful retirement. His name would forever be passed down in the history of mankind. The old king no longer had the vigor he had when he was young. If he took off his clothes and walked into the marketplace, he would look like an ordinary old man. He really didn't have any desires. His only remaining wish was probably to have a house full of children and grandchildren, just like ordinary old people. Therefore, after eldest Prince Charles repeatedly mentioned it in his ear, it also aroused his interest in urging his children to get married. Of course, in addition to looking for a suitable young man for the eldest princess, he also began to look for a suitable girl for the eldest prince. In short, the old king had found a new hobby. And the eldest princess was bitter, but couldn't say anything. Fortunately, the old king was open-minded enough to not force his children to accept someone they didn't like. And with the current status of the kingdom, there was no need for a marriage alliance. So although it was disgusting, it didn't have any practical effect. That afternoon, after the eldest princess rejected a blind date, she went to the residence of the 2 little princesses to find comfort. Although the eldest princess and the 2 little princesses didn't have the same mother, and the little princesses were mischievous, the eldest princess still liked the 2 little sisters from the bottom of her heart. Every time she encountered something annoying, as long as she saw the smiles of her sisters, she would be able to cheer up. When she entered the residence, She was led by a maid to the room of the second princess, Anna. She pushed the door open and entered. Anna and Enchi were lying on the bed in an ungraceful manner, flipping through 2 newspapers and having an intense discussion. "What are you arguing about now?" Elisha asked the maid to leave and closed the door behind her. The third princess Enchi immediately shouted, "Sister Elisha, I said that the white dragon is stronger than the black dragon, but Anna insisted on fighting with me." "What white dragon and black dragon?" Elisha looked confused. Enchi got up, waved the newspaper and said, "The Shung Malian Academy's magic fairy, the silver dragon ladies, sky white dragon, and the baron of the knights, red-back black dragon." Anna snorted and said, "I said that the sky white dragon is stronger than the red-back black dragon, because the silver dragon lady is stronger than the baron of the night, not because of the difference in strength between the magic fairies. If it's a one-on-one battle, the sky white dragon might not be a match for the red-back black dragon." Elisha immediately understood the reason. She couldn't help but cover her forehead and said, "You two are obviously fans of the silver dragon lady. Why are you arguing over this?" And she waved the newspaper again and said seriously, "No, I'm a white dragon fan now. Sister is the dragon lady fan." Anna glanced at her and sneered, "Just you wait. When I get the white dragon, you'll cry and beg me." Elisha was confused again. What did she mean by getting the white dragon? She took the newspaper from Enchi's hand and looked at it carefully. She frowned and said, "Is the Shung Malian short of money?" Obviously, she saw through the trick at a glance. But for things like model Easter eggs, it was useless even if you saw through the trick. As long as there was a target, they would always step into the trap. For example, Anna and Enchi had obviously fallen into the trap willingly. Easter eggs, Easter dual sacrifice. The eldest princess's thoughts gradually diverged, and she suddenly had a bad premonition. Then, she immediately looked up the magic elf illustration book published in the newspaper. Sure enough, she found one of the magic elves in the illustration book. They even produced a magic elf for first-year students. It's over. Duke's Mansion. The kingdom's only duchess, Yervette St. Dimming, was working seriously when the Sage of Beasts Claire Kate, who was holding Fat Cat, pushed the door open and entered. "Yervette, look what I found." Claire excitedly slammed 2 newspapers on Yervette's desk. Yervette glanced at her with a complaining look, but put down the pen in her hand and opened the 2 newspapers. Claire didn't say a word and just stood there and watched. Sure enough, after a while, Yervette showed an intense reaction as she expected. "Claire, this white cat is Dake's magic elf, right? I remember it fused with another black cat to become a 7-star cat girl." Claire nodded and said, "It's called a Diru Beast, a light attribute magic elf." Yervette said excitedly, "Sure enough. I wonder if Dake will participate in this Easter duel sacrifice?" Claire pointed to another newspaper and said, "This duel competition has a special audition mode, and it's divided into 2 groups. The lower grades are 1st to 3rd grade. I think the probability of Dake participating is not low." "Is it the first day of April? Let me see." Yervette immediately began to check the schedule. "There's a royal announcement on Easter, so cancel it. Help me inform Elisha that she has grown up and should learn to face her competitors alone." Claire couldn't help but smile. "How about this? It's been a long time since there's a tea party. I'll invite the princesses." Yervette, "Okay." The royal announcement on Easter, to put it bluntly, was a speech held by the eldest princess and the eldest prince to compete for public opinion. It would probably last for the entire morning. This was considered a daily activity among the many activities of the 2 royal heirs. It was a small matter. Of course, if one didn't take a few steps, one wouldn't be able to reach 1,000 miles. Even if it was a small matter, the eldest princess would do her best. But this time, she clearly wouldn't be able to obtain the company of the Valkyrie. Between people and affairs, there were many things that were involved in all aspects. Dake probably didn't think that his casual proposal would have such a wide impact. In the last week of March, he studied the method of refining magic tools into item cards, and then did 2 experiments, both of which ended in failure. The level of the bloodthirsty Greytax seemed to be higher than he expected, and the requirements for refining it were beyond his ability. In the blink of an eye, It was Friday, the 30th of March. There were less than 2 days left until the 1st of April. In order to make their presence felt in the big battle of the qualifiers, the first-year little sorcerers rushed to Travelers Street to buy materials for the final push. The materials obtained from the underground city trip at the beginning of March allowed many students to upgrade their card sets. But it wasn't enough to make their card sets reach the number of 40, and if they wanted to participate in the big battle of the qualifiers, they had to at least reach the number of magic cards, right? So whether it was to make up the numbers or to cram at the last minute, they had to refine enough magic cards. Dake Dimming actually had a similar problem. His core magic cards couldn't reach the number of 40, so he had to add magic cards like Reveal Powder, Silence Potion, Energy Potion, and so on to his card set. It was a good thing that the cards used to make up the numbers weren't completely useless. Maybe at some point, they could still play a key role. It rained heavily on the last day of March. However, Professor Mitya had said in the astronomy class on Wednesday that the sky would clear up at Easter, so the students weren't too worried. They stepped on the mud and ran along Travelers Street. They were like plants in spring, full of vitality. Dake went to the cat flower shop and told Miss Cat about the current situation of the lion grass. Although Miss Cat was shocked and even wanted to buy the lion grass from him for research, she chose to give up when Dake smiled. Dake asked for information about the rabbit grass and bought the cat juice magic potion for the cat grass before leaving the cat flower shop. Then he went to the gnome's ancient bookstore and tried to find some unorthodox item card refining methods. But until noon he still couldn't find any suitable refining methods for the bloodthirsty axe. Until a book named Blood Sacrifice appeared in his field of vision. Blood Sacrifice? Just by looking at the title of the book, there was an evil aura. Dake couldn't help but frown. The word blood sacrifice wasn't a good word. If it wasn't for the fact that they were selling dog meat under false pretenses. With this thought in mind, Dake inserted 2 fingers into the gap of the book and pulled it out forcefully. The dust that came out showed that the book had been here for a long time. The author is... There's no author? Dake couldn't help but hesitate. Not only did this book not have an author, but it also didn't have an editor. But he still carefully flipped it open. The cover of the book was made of a hard shell material. The inner pages had a texture between cloth and leather, but it was very light and looked like it was highly absorbent. He turned to the title page, and the first line that came into view was "Frowny Face, Blood and Corpses, who is at the end?" The meaning is unclear. Dake whispered and continued to turn to the next page. But the next page was blank. Looking further down, it was still a blank space. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. He quickly flipped through the book and finally understood why it was placed in the corner of the bookshelf. Of course, if he hypothesized according to the logic of the novel, this wordless heavenly book might be a treasure. Dake stroked the pages and looked at the title of the book. Suddenly he had an idea. Could it be that the blood sacrifice means to soak this book in blood? This is absorbent paper made from the skin of the luoluo tree frog. It doesn't need to be soaked in blood, just water will do. The sudden voice behind him made Dake turn around abruptly. A lady with a smile appeared in front of him. She had bright orange-red hair. The ends of her hair were tied up with a hairband around her neck and hung in front of her chest. Her face wasn't delicate, but her facial features were soft and very friendly. She looked very beautiful when she smiled. "You are?" Dake tried hard to think, but he still couldn't remember where he had seen her before. Lia Gerda. Lia Gerda nodded at Dake, then pointed at the book in his hand. "You're a first-year student, right? This book might not be suitable for you." Dake smiled and said, "Hello, Miss Gerda. I think it's not a good choice to describe a person's age or age." Lia also smiled. "Then let me put it another way. This book is not suitable for you. 8000/10,000. Wait, let's calculate the reward." Chapter 373. In the face of Leah's decisive statement, Dake only asked casually, "Why is that so?" Leah shook her head. The Lolo tree frog is a specialty of the demon race's vampire territory. Vampires often use its skin to make magic books of blood magic. Blood magic is very dangerous. Those without the talent for blood magic are best not to come into contact with it. Blood magic? Dake's mind moved slightly, and there was a hint of something else in his eyes when he looked at Leah. Of course, he knew about blood magic. Blood magic belonged to the category of high-level talent magic. Just like astrology, it required talent as a foundation. Basically, vampires, as well as the lower creatures of vampires, were born with the ability to master blood magic. Apart from vampires, there were also some rare races that had the talent for blood magic. Among humans, only the Fresh Blood clan had mastered blood magic. They were known as the nemesis of vampires. But now, the only surviving member of the Fresh Blood clan on the surface was probably the Fresh Blood concubine, Ophelia Blood. Remember the website, MVIP can't you? VIP Dake and the professors inferred the possibility of the Fresh Blood concubine surviving through some information and overlapped her with the fugitive from Badia prison, Olivia Copernicus. Therefore, when blood magic was mentioned, Dake naturally thought of the Fresh Blood concubine, Ophelia Blood. Leah. Ophelia? Dake pretended to mutter. But Leah Gerda's expression did not change at all. It was still warm and gentle, just like a fake face. This thought came to him. Dake could no longer control his eyes when he looked at Leah's face. Leah Gerda seemed to have noticed his gaze and said softly, "Retreating in the face of danger, thinking too much, is really cautious. Of course, this is my personal opinion. If you insist on coming into contact, you have to be more cautious." After saying that, she winked at Dake. Her orange-red pupils, like the color of her hair, revealed a hint of mischief. Then she walked to the side and flipped through other books. Dake loosened his grip on the blood sacrifice and took a light breath. Although his intuition told him that Leah Gerda was related to Ophelia Blood, she did not show any signs of being related to the blood mistress. Moreover, the reason why he thought that Scarlet Blood concubine might be in the academy was because of Luobote's divination. But now, it was confirmed that Luobote's divination was due to Vlad's existence, which overturned the previous hypothesis. There was no evidence to support Blood Maiden's inference in the academy. Moreover, regardless of whether that intuition was accurate or not, it was not appropriate to investigate too directly. Dake was not arrogant enough to think that he could compete with the heroes of war. He lowered his head and glanced at blood sacrifice. He pursed his lips and looked in the direction of Leah Gerda, wondering if he should continue to observe or follow her. But as he lowered his head and looked up, the gentle lady who was flipping through the books in front of the bookshelf disappeared without a trace. Dake's eyes flashed and he immediately took a few steps forward. Then he quickly rushed out and looked left and right, only to find that Leah Gerda had really disappeared. Who is she? Dake couldn't help but stop. His expression changed slightly. In the end, Dake bought blood sacrifice. On the way back to the castle, he recalled Leah Gerda's appearance. Her long orange-red hair was different from the hair color in Blood Maiden's past photos and the photos of Olivia when she turned herself in. The outline of her face was somewhat similar. But in this world, there were countless people with similar faces. Her facial features were obviously different. Is this the effect of a disguise caused by magic? Dake reached out and touched the top of his temple. The blessing of the wind spirits wrapped around his finger, bringing a trace of coolness. Unfortunately, he did not have the corresponding talent. Otherwise, he could have used this wisp of wind to send a message to Professor Shi-Erfu. Let's go and talk to him. Dake put blood sacrifice in his bag and walked quickly to Professor Shi-Erfu's classroom. Although it was Saturday, the Easter Duel Festival was tomorrow. He guessed that Professor Shi-Erfu must be busy in the office. The result was as expected. After knocking on the door and entering the office, Dake immediately told Professor Shi-Erfu about his encounter with Leah Gerda. He also mentioned Professor Midya's reminder, hoping that Professor Shi-Erfu would be alerted. Don't worry about safety. Professor Shi-Erfu nodded seriously. When the time comes, the professors will be patrolling all over the place. The Shungmalian professors were undoubtedly the guarantee of safety. Dake was a little relieved, and then said, although it's just a guess, my intuition tells me that that person is the Blood Maiden. Although she may have disguised herself, the gentle temperament she showed is very consistent with your previous description. If she had any reason to disguise herself, and if I were in her position, I would definitely not risk exposing myself by reminding a student I don't actually know. Professor Shirfa's serious face softened slightly. She looked up as if she was reminiscing, and said, Brad is such a person. She is gentle and kind. It is completely unimaginable that she is a member of the blood clan. If it is really her, there is no need to worry. She will not do anything to endanger the students. I hope so. Dake crossed his fingers and said, but everyone has two sides, and she is someone who escaped after more than 10 years of prison. Professor Shirfa seemed a little impatient at the mention of this. She knocked on the table and said, I still believe in her. She must have her reasons. Dake raised his eyebrows and said, Professor, I still have something to do, so I will leave first. Professor Shirfa nodded. See you tomorrow. I wish you a good performance. Dake smiled. The goal is to pass the audition. Needless to say, with the format of the audition, the possibility of failing miserably was not small. Fortunately, the audition for the low and high groups were separated, otherwise, there would be no chance at all. After Dake returned to the dormitory, he quickly put the matter of the blood concubine to the back of his mind, and turned to study the book Blood Sacrifice. It was not that he did not believe Liaugurda's words, but although he did not have the talent for blood magic, he had an expert in his family. Moreover, since he had already bought it, he would not be satisfied if he did not see what it was. According to Miss Gerda, just soak it in water. After greeting the magic elves, Dake picked a basin of suitable size and put it under the tap to collect water. While waiting for the water to collect, he picked up the book again and shook it hard. After confirming that there was nothing inside, he turned off the tap and slowly put the book into the basin. Almost as soon as it entered the water, the pages began to absorb the water. The originally thin paper slowly had a texture, and on the surface of the paper, small words gradually appeared. This kind of concealment measure was actually quite elementary, far less advanced than the secret ancient text of Into the Abyss. After the paper absorbed a certain amount of water, it did not continue. Dake opened the book directly in the water, and started to read from the first page. The book looked quite thick, but there were surprisingly few words. Not long after, Dake had a rough understanding of it. Then he sighed, picked up the book from the basin and hung it on the shelf at the side. It was not that this book was not good. It was just that it was useless to him. Blood sacrifice was like its name. It talked about a blood sacrifice method. Using the blood of animals, demons, human blood, all kinds of blood as energy, through blood magic, it was transformed into a powerful force, and then used to cast spells, summon, and even create weapons. The bloodthirsty axe that Dake seized from the two-headed devil was most likely created through the blood sacrifice method. Blood sacrifice did not belong to the magical technology, but belonged to the category of blood magic. Not only could it not be used to refine the bloodthirsty axe into a magical card, but it also had no effect on Dake. If the little demon beast or the Diru beast could master this method, it could be more efficient to use the absorbed blood energy after evolving into the Basti beast. But the Diru beast had only learned how to perceive and output magic power, so this book of blood sacrifice could only be put on the shelf for the time being. Thinking of this, Dake looked at blood sacrifice with a slightly regretful gaze. Wait, but then he suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Thinking about it from another perspective, the pages of this book are all made from the skin of the luoluo tree frog. Although it has been processed to a certain extent, it still retains the skin properties of the luoluo tree frog. Can this thing be used to refine? Speaking of which, this luoluo tree frog, what kind of demon is it? Dake's mind moved, and he immediately pulled out the book of the secret record of birds and beasts, unknown strange ecology from the bookshelf, and then carefully flipped through it. Frogs were an amphibian species, not a reptile species. In this world, they were classified as birds and beasts. This book of the secret record of birds and beasts that Claire had given him recorded a large number of birds and beasts, and Dake had only read a small part of it. Sure enough, a demon like the luoluo tree frog with special uses is recorded in this book of the secret record of birds and beasts. 10 minutes later, Dake finally found the name luoluo tree frog in the densely packed catalog. He flipped to the content page according to the page number, and the first thing that entered his eyes was the color picture of the luoluo tree frog. It was slightly different from the tree frog Dake imagined. This luoluo tree frog had a slightly gray-white skin, and it was very similar to an ordinary tree frog, without a trace of markings on its skin. It could absorb water and store it in its skin, and even under the scorching sun, it could retain moisture. On top of the luoluo tree frog's head, there was a small bulge, which was actually a seed. When the luoluo tree frog died, the seed that absorbed its essence would take root and germinate on its corpse, and grow into a swamp tree named luoluo. The luoluo tree frog usually lived in the hollow of the luoluo tree, and it had a symbiotic relationship with the luoluo tree. In short, this was a rather rare tree frog. But when it came to the rank of a demon, it was obviously not enough. This meant that if it was used as a core material to refine a magic fairy, perhaps it would only be able to refine a 1 or 2-star cutie. It was even possible that the refining process would fail, because the material had been processed. But in the end, Dake didn't care much about this book of blood sacrifice. When he bought it, he only spent less than 100 credits, so even if it was scrapped he wouldn't be too distressed. So he thought that he might as well give it a try. But before the experiment, he needed to extract the contents of blood sacrifice. Each page of blood sacrifice had no more than 100 words, and there was only one page, so the total number of words was only a few thousand. Dake simply split blood sacrifice into pages, and let the magic fairies help him copy it. In this way, it only took half an hour to completely extract the text of blood sacrifice. Finally, he kept the page with the blood sacrifice magic array, and started to refine it. The refining method used this time was the most basic refining method. The materials used were generally the luoluo tree frog's parchment as the core, and the remaining materials obtained from the underground city as supplementary. In short, it was like cooking radishes and vegetables in a pot, casually refining. When Dake first learned the basic refining method, he also casually refined it and refined his first gold card. Kettle. Later on, Horned Hawkman and Ball Sea Lion were also refined this way. Although these two magic fairies weren't particularly powerful, their future was promising. Tree Frog, let me think, what kind of magic fairies are similar to the tree frog's attributes and race? Grass type, water type, frog type? Wonderful frog seed or mosquito coil tadpole. Wonderful frog seed is grass type and poison type, while mosquito coil tadpole is pure water type. Especially the bullfrog monarch evolved from mosquito coil tadpole. It looks quite similar to the luoluo tree frog. If it's a digital beast, monstrous frog beast? Monstrous frog emperor? What else is there? Or perhaps a Yu-Gi-Oh monster from the Frog series? I don't care. Dake picked up a cup of kettle apple juice and drank it in one gulp. Instantly he felt refreshed. Now he didn't need to do the brewing of the apple juice himself. Heartwarming Kettle could generate its own electricity, and would prepare a cup of apple juice for him every night. Dake glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 8:45 p.m., and there was still plenty of time. He started preparing from this moment, and it only took him half an hour to complete all the preparations for the experiment. Then it took another half an hour to complete a semi-finished magic card. After drawing and activating the first refining formation, he could start putting the materials into the refining formation. Dake had always felt that the greatest joy in refining magic fairies was putting the materials into the refining formation. It was like cooking. Different materials and condiments could be concocted into different flavors. The process of cutting open the light cocoon was like opening a lottery. No matter how strange the materials were, it was possible to refine a powerful magic fairy, and it was very enjoyable. This time, in addition to putting in the grass-type materials obtained from the dungeon, he also didn't forget to put in his usual catalyst, saliva. In the end, he even deliberately rebound the missing page of blood sacrifice, and put it together into the refining formation. However, after putting in so many materials, the brightness of the refining formation still hadn't reached its limit. Therefore, he continued to put in 2-in-1-4100/12,000. Chapter 374. After all, they were all materials that weren't of much use, so of course he would put in as much as he could. Dake put it aside, and couldn't help but recall the situation when he made Kettle last year. He couldn't help but smile, and then flicked a bit of the vine monster's powder into it. In that instant, the number 1 refining formation lit up brightly, and the reaction was clearly more intense. Enough. Dake's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately focused, adjusting with magic. A moment later, all the materials were sucked into the light formation. The number 1 refining formation also quickly shrank. But the materials this time were clearly too heterogeneous, and even after the refining formation started shrinking, it still took a lot of time to continue smelting. Then a large amount of impurities were spat out. The impurities mixed with liquid and solid were pitch black, and the stench was so foul that the magic guiding fairies all started crying out. Remember in a second. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP goddess Evie looked at the experiment table with disdain, and then used a ribbon to open the window to quickly ventilate. It wasn't until a few minutes later that the magic guiding card formed a cocoon of light, as expected. Dake quietly wiped his sweat, and put down the hand that was covering his nose, ready to draw the prize. Dake's ideal magic guiding fairy was, of course, Wonderful Frog, one of the 3 families of Pokemon without a seal. After all, it was a memory of his youth, and it had the bonus of feelings. But the refining of magic guiding was never something that could come out just because you wanted it. He held his breath, took out a mercury knife from the shelf, and cut open the cocoon of light. Instantly, a puddle of even more smelly black water flowed out. What on earth did I refine? Dake hurriedly covered his nose again, and only used one hand to change to a pair of tweezers. He carefully picked up the magic guiding card from the black water, and put it under the tap to wash it. When the stains on the surface of the magic guiding card were gradually washed away, a ray of light shone out. That was a rather rare purple light among the magic guiding fairy cards that Dake had refined. White, blue, purple, orange, gold. This purple quality was between the 5 colors, and was only average. But in reality, Dake was already very satisfied. I can refine a purple card with only these materials. Looks like my luck in refining magic guiding is pretty good. In his joy, Dake couldn't wait to move the dripping magic guiding card in front of him. This is. After looking at the surface of the magic card, Dark furrowed his brows. The pattern displayed on the card was not any of the magic elves that he had guessed. Recently, I've been feeling that many things aren't within my grasp. Dake couldn't help but rub his brows, gradually relaxing them. Then he put down the magic card and quickly cleaned up the smelly things on the table. First, he tidied up the table before checking the magic card. There was no hurry. A few minutes later, he picked up the unexpected card again. What was displayed on the card was a grimoire that looked very similar to the emblem of the Sorcerer Academy. Originally, he wanted to use the Luoluo tree frog skin to refine a frog-type magic guide fairy. But in the end, the core seemed to be the book itself, Blood Sacrifice. Although he couldn't understand the principle behind it, he was lucky enough to be able to successfully refine it in such a hot summer. But what was the use of this grimoire-looking magic guide fairy? Dake first thought of the single scabbard, which was also an item, and then thought of Talim, from Pokemon. Thus, he had even more expectations for this magic book-like elf. Finally, I can study it properly. Dake transferred his magic power into the magic guiding card, and soon received a response. Card name, Secretary of Sorcerer. Type, Fairy card, Level. Race, Fairy species, Attribute. Fairy type, Magic power, 1000. Attack, 0. Defense, 0. Ultimate skills. Automatic Secretary, Automatic Summon, a 2-star magic guide fairy named Secretary of Sorcerer? This should be my second 2-star magic guide fairy. It can make up for the lack of 2-star offerings. Magic power 1000, the value of a 2-star pinnacle. Its attack and defense are 0, which means that it's not good at direct combat. But such a grimoire can't participate in direct combat. It must be a support type. Let me take a look at its 2 ultimate skills. The most important elements of a magic guide fairy card were its star level and ultimate skills. The ultimate skills were the key to whether or not a magic guide fairy card was useful. The star level was the key to whether or not the ultimate skills were effective. Dake looked at the first ultimate skill. Automatic Secretary. The name of this sure-kill skill always reminds me of a certain magic library with 103,000 magic books. I wonder if it has the ability to automatically release magic? Automatic secretary. Able to automatically record text, images, and other information. That's it? Isn't this equivalent to having an automatic copy notebook? After understanding the function of the automatic secretary, Dake's face darkened. But after only 3 seconds, he changed his mind and was suddenly amused. Being able to automatically record text and images doesn't seem too bad? This ultimate skill was actually very useless for a normal magus with average magic power talent. But for Dake, whose magic power recovery speed was enough to offset the magic guide fairy's magic power consumption, it was equivalent to having an automatic recorder. What's more, he could even use the Great Sin card to increase its intelligence. Once this magical secretary's intelligence level was close to that of a human, it wouldn't be as simple as an automatic recorder. It would at least be an automatic coder. An automatic coder would be the envy of everyone. This was equivalent to evolving from a paper notebook into a computer. Thinking of this, Dake felt like he had picked up a treasure. No rush, there's still one more ultimate skill. Suppressing the urge to use the Great Sin card, Dake looked at the second ultimate skill. Automatic summon. The name of the ultimate skill, automatic summon, would give people an unrealistic idea. But with the automatic secretary as a prerequisite, Dake's mentality was a lot calmer, so he didn't feel disappointed after understanding it. In fact, he was even a little happy. Automatic summon. Choose a summoning spell to record. You can summon on behalf of the magus. Only the magus can be recorded. Record a summoning spell, automatic summon. This is great. As long as I record a normal summoning spell, I won't need to spend nearly half an hour to summon the lion beast. Dake's first thought was the convenience of life, then he started thinking about duels. He immediately realized that this automatic summon ultimate skill was quite useful in duels. According to the description, the summoning spells recorded in the magical secretary had to be mastered by the magus himself. Although each summon would consume 100 points of magic, the summoning speed and cooldown would be the same as the target of the recording, the magus himself. If it recorded a normal summoning spell, it meant that the summoning speed would be doubled, and he could even consider using a normal summoning spell to summon a 4-star magic elf. If it recorded a sacrificial summoning spell, it meant that he could give the task of sacrificial summoning to the magical secretary, or if he had enough sacrifices, he could sacrifice and summon 2 high-star magic elves at the same time. Apart from this, no matter which summoning spell it would give the magus himself more time to make decisions. If he used the magical secretary, well, he would be able to greatly increase his battle strength. But the problem now is, can the magical secretary, which has 0 attack and defense, stay in the duel for a long time? How long is the cooldown of the automatic summon record summoning spell? Let's summon it and see. With this thought, Dake immediately used a normal summoning spell to summon the magical secretary. The magical secretary, that was materialized in the light of summoning, was about the size of 4K paper, and it was more than 3 centimeters thick. It was completely different from the blood sacrifice. That was the core material. But when Dake held it in his hand, he didn't feel the slightest bit of weight. Just like its race, the magical secretary was the fairy of the grimoire. It looked steady and solid on the surface, but it was actually illusory and ethereal. With just a little bit of force, his finger penetrated the book. It could be seen that it could also switch between being illusory and being real. This structure was like that of a ghost, and it naturally had extremely high physical immunity. There was no need to even try, as its magic resistance was quite low. In a real battle, the magical secretary could be placed by his side, but in the duel, it was like the magic ball, an object that needed to be protected. Fortunately, the length and width of the 4K paper wasn't particularly large, and its illusory nature allowed it to hide in some small gaps to protect itself. In the name of Dake Dimung, magical summoning, a dark golden light illuminated the bedroom, and a ball of light flew out from the Pride Eye card and entered the magical secretary in an instant. Moments later, The grimoire that was floating in the palm of Dake's hand began to tremble violently. It was like an ancient life form that had been sealed in the glacier had awakened from its eternal slumber after the glacier melted. Its consciousness and body were connected. The magical secretary had obtained intelligence that was hard to obtain from a magical fairy. Even though Dake was already used to it, giving a life form the intelligence of a higher life form was always a miraculous power. And in this miracle, the magical secretary welcomed a new life. This was a magical fairy that could only be summoned in a real battle. And its value had been raised to a whole new level. Magical Secretary 0001. I offer my loyalty to my master. What surprised Dark the most was that this magic guide sprite, which was not a digitized beast, actually grasped the ability of language the moment it gained sentience. Even though its voice was as mechanical and dull as an AI, it was clearly relying on its own will to speak. 0001 is too hard to pronounce, so I'll call it 0101. Yes, master, I'm 01. I'm 01. Beep 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 beep. Seeing the magical secretary happily dancing in circles in the air, Dake suddenly realized that under its knowledgeable appearance, there was a funny heart. He pondered for a moment and suddenly asked, 01, since you have the ability to recognize voices, can you turn them into text? I can try, beep beep beep. Attempt failed, beep beep beep. So noisy? Dake hurriedly asked. What's the reason for the failure? The magical secretary immediately replied. Master, 01 can't read beep beep beep. Alright. Dake took a deep breath. This was indeed a problem. But who would have thought that a book couldn't read? Looks like I'll have to start from scratch again, but a magical secretary that can automatically record text and images shouldn't be bad at learning. Now there's another problem. Dake couldn't help but look at the magical secretary that was still spinning in circles, and casually picked up a pen from the table. 01, can you record images in real life such as this pen? I can try, beep beep beep. The magical secretary finally stopped spinning and automatically flipped to the first page, then aimed at the pen and began to record. The recording process was like the process of sketching. On that page, the entire pen was sketched out at a speed visible to the naked eye. Apart from being black and white 2D, even the details were exactly the same. This wasn't just sketching, it was taking pictures. Very good. At this moment, Dake had a new understanding of the magical secretary. Automatic secretary's function was much more powerful than he'd imagined. In the future, whether it was reading notes or taking pictures of the scenery, it would be much more convenient. When encountering murals that needed to be recorded, it could also save time on drawing them. If the magical secretary could obtain the ability to process these images through education, it would further transform. You can always follow me from now on. Thank you, master. Humph. I'm not happy about being able to follow you. Beep beep beep. Beep beep beep. Still under the influence of pride? Then it's fine. Now let's test the automatic summon function. The automatic summon experiment was very simple. Dake held the magical secretary's magical secretary card in his hand, infused it with magic to form a magic cycle, and then began to cast the normal summon. The moment the summon was successful, it was completely recorded by the magical secretary. After that, until he switched to the summoning technique, the magical secretary would always use this template to perform automatic summons. With this function, it would be very convenient to summon the magic elf one by one in the dormitory or other places in the future. The limitation was that only one summoning technique could be recorded at a time. Moreover, the cooldown of the summoning technique was as long as an hour, and it was basically impossible to switch freely. Even so, it was already a very useful surekill skill. To be able to use a pile of junk to create such a rare and useful magic elf, he couldn't ask for more. A man who is never content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. The smile on Dake's face gradually bloomed. Beep beep beep. Beep beep beep. In the name of Dake Dimung, magic summoning, silencing potion. 2-in-18000/12000. Chapter 375. After forbidding the magician's secretary from making any more beeping sounds, Dark picked out a basic teaching material and had the magician's secretary record it down. Then he personally taught it the basics. For a grimoire that could record its own words as part of its memory, the most important thing was to teach it some logical cognition and the most basic knowledge. For example, phonetic alphabet, spelling structure, sentence grammar, etc. Once it started learning, the magician's secretary's learning speed would probably be faster than the intelligent Dilu beast. However, its problem was obvious. As a medium, the book itself had a limit to the amount of words it could record. As the amount of information increased, it would eventually need to convert the information recorded in the book into its own memory, the part that was located in its sole consciousness. However, before it was filled up, the magician's secretary could do whatever it wanted in the sea of information. Midnight. When the bell signifying the passing of the month rang, Dark ended the introductory lesson for the magician's secretary. First website. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. The results of the teaching were quite good. The magician's secretary's speed of learning was indeed much faster than the other magician elves. It even gave Dake the illusion that it would be able to catch up with him tomorrow. Let's take a bath and relax. Dake soaked himself in the hot water. Only half of his head was exposed. He looked at the rising steam and opened the index of the 7 sins. System open index. Opening. A moment later, 7 indexes appeared in Dake's vision. Compared to the end of last month, it was Pride, 102.98, Envy, 38.39, Fury, 84.83, Sloth, 63.67, Greed, 98.96, Gluttony, 70.72, Bliss, 103.102. In March, a total of 6 points of Pride, 6 points of Greed and 3 points of Bliss were drawn. Pride and Bliss were the undefeated champions of the 7 deadly sins, and they had been persistently rising up the ranks this month. Even if 6 and 3 points of each were drawn, it still didn't stop their rising trend. Greed also grew under Dake's deliberate indulgence, but it was obviously not enough. A sin like greed was different from bliss. The more one wanted to deliberately raise it, the more one would realize that one wasn't greedy. Moreover, one couldn't be overly indulgent, or else it would instantly skyrocket. This was actually very contradictory. As for the other major crimes other than fury, they were only slightly elevated. This was a good sign. As of now, Dake's remaining sins were frowny face pride, 0 bliss, 2 greed, 2. With the current situation, it would be very difficult to craft greed 3 in April. Because greed was only 96, he could only draw 1 point from it. Of course, if he could use desire to win to restrain the growth of greed, it would work as well. However, the remaining 8 points needed to draw was 6 draws. After that, April only had 4 chances left, and he could only draw 6 more great sins. If the remaining 6 points were pride, it wouldn't be enough to cultivate a fruit of great sin. Greed and bliss, on the other hand, could reach 7 points. This meant that if he wanted to cultivate a fruit of great sin next month, he would have to choose between bliss and greed. There was still a week before he had to choose. He would decide then. Dake folded the towel and covered his forehead, allowing the steam to surround him. If tomorrow's competition was successful, he would have another chance to enter the secret tunnel. At that time, he would be able to carry out his idea for the living metal. Perhaps that would be the core goal in April. At the thought of the upcoming experiment, he was slightly excited. The unknown and mysterious were always anticipated, especially the moment when it was revealed. On the last night before the arrival of April, there were many people who were eager for the future with all kinds of thoughts in their minds. The coldness of winter gradually subsided as the months passed, and the warmth of the spring festival returned to the land. The students who had obtained a lot of materials from the dungeon also needed a chance to prove themselves. Dake, Doran, and Deanna from the aristocrat house, Ai Ma, Justin, and White from the knight house, and Sarah from the sorcerer house. These 7 first-year duelists were all waiting for the arrival of the Easter Duel Festival. A true warrior dared to challenge the peak. During the newcomers' competition, Dake Diming's enthusiastic performance had secretly stimulated the competitive spirit of the first-year students. It also gave the second-year students a sense of urgency, especially the second-year senior Elsie Kevin who lost to Dake. He was even more determined and his growth was significant. He was probably looking forward to completing his revenge in the duel arena. And this year's Easter Duel Festival was clearly an opportunity for him. In addition, there were second-year Leon from the Fool House, second-year Mary from the Aristocrat House, third-year Winnie Scatty from the Sorcerer House, third-year Helena Tracy from the Knight House, third-year Angelia Hudson from the Fool House, third-year Michael Owen from the Aristocrat House. Some seniors that Dake didn't know by name were also aiming for this year's Easter Duel Festival. Even if they weren't aiming for victory, most of them were interested in the new format of the qualifiers. Some of the more forward-looking people had already realized the aesthetic and sustainable nature of this format. Some even participated with the intention of being the first to experience it. They believed that if this format performed well in the Easter Duel Festival, it was likely to be imitated by other competitions and even be carried forward. Outside the academy, there were also professionals with similar intentions who bought tickets to observe the effects of this mode of competition. Originally, a new format like this that hadn't been tested would not attract too much attention. But who let this new format come from the Shung Malian Academy? As a holy land that attracted countless attention, the Shung Malian Academy was synonymous with authority. Even if the whole format itself wasn't good, there would be as many people blindly following the trend as the stars. At this time, if you didn't have a sense of the industry and didn't follow the footsteps of the changing times, then you could only blame yourself for being eliminated by the times. It was past midnight. When most of the students and professors had already gone to sleep, Leah, who lived in Professor Midia's dormitory, was still staring at the moon. After removing the disguise of her orange-red hair and dispelling the facial transformation magic, Leah, who seemed to have just finished bathing, stood on the balcony and looked at the bright moon outside the guardrail. Her long hair was as red as blood. Her skin was so white that it lacked blood, and it was particularly pale in the dark environment. Her pupils were deep, her nose was high, her lips were full but petite, and her facial features were delicate and three-dimensional. If you just looked at her face, it didn't have the gentle temperament that her soft face could bring out. Instead, it gave people a sharp feeling. But as long as you had a little contact with her, you would be captured by the gentleness revealed in her words and actions. Sigh. Leaning against the balcony door, Midia Bartholomew sighed slightly. Looking at Leah's back like this, she could not help but recall the first time the two of them met. At that time, she was also confused by the gentle temperament of Leah. So she ignored her identity and mistook her for a weak girl who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. It wasn't until later when she was in danger and was rescued that Midia realized how strong the will hidden under this gentle appearance was. But this time it seemed that something was different. It's already Easter. Leah suddenly turned around and showed a bright smile to Midia. Midia shrugged her shoulders and said, "I wish you success." Leah said, "Don't worry, there won't be any problems. If tomorrow is successful, I will probably leave." Midia waved her hand in disdain and said, "Go, go, go, I can't wait for you to leave." Leah smiled and showed a trace of sadness. "I thought you would ask me to stay." Midia sneered and said, "Without you, I will only sleep more comfortably. You take up half of my bed every day." Leah said softly, "Don't be lonely." Midia's expression didn't change. "It's been so many years." Leah smiled and said, "Then today is the last night." Midia, "I hope so." Leah turned back to look at the night sky without much concern, then walked back into the room. In the long river of fate, we are all boats without sails. We can't make oars, we can only go with the flow. Then we will make oars. The quiet night was unusually deep, and the stars hidden under the dark curtain flickered. The ancient castle crawled in the axis of time and space, as if it was breathing. When the night retreated, the first ray of white light appeared on the horizon. Easter, which was the day, had finally arrived. Dida. Before the alarm went off, Dake woke up because of his biological clock. He continued to sleep on the bed for a while, enjoying the joy of hugging one woman on each side. When the alarm was about to go off, he suddenly reached out and turned it off. Then, he carefully got up without turning over the quilt. He didn't know when the small dream demon came out, but it was sleeping soundly on his chest. The red string of beads hanging around its neck emitted a faint red light, continuously replenishing the dream demon's magic. It had obviously mastered the skill of transforming the magic within the fear gem for its own use. Moreover, it had absorbed a large amount of magic from an unknown source. Dark had a headache and reached out to stroke its head. There were no rumors of ghosts in the aristocrat house's tower. This meant that the dream demon was quite obedient, and didn't casually use the fear gem to absorb the energy of fear. However, the large amount of magic within the fear gem meant that it was absorbing magic. This meant that it had attacked someone in the dream. Dreams were a very mysterious phenomenon. No matter how terrifying a nightmare was, the fear caused by the nightmare could be vented through a scream. Coincidentally, the tower dormitory's sound insulation was very good. In a situation where there was no obvious impact, Dark, who was troubled by many things, did not have the energy to pursue the matter further. He pinched the dream demon's cheeks like he was pinching a balloon. After getting out of bed, he stuffed it into the empty space under the quilt. It's really sunny. He pulled open the black velvet curtains, and the clear sky with some floating white clouds came into view. Dake yawned slightly and reached out his hand. The little devil beast, who had gotten up earlier than him, lightly jumped, flapped its wings, and landed on his forearm. Dake touched the back of its head and said with a smile, "Do you want to accompany me to the cafeteria?" The little devil beast rolled its eyes and knew that there wasn't a little red flower this morning. However, the price of a little red flower in exchange for the happiness of having breakfast with its master, and the jealousy of the thieving cats was really worth it. It immediately squinted its eyes and said flatteringly, "Today's master is as handsome as always." Dake's hair stood on end, and goosebumps appeared all over his body. The day of Easter started with waking up. Although the academy didn't set up any holidays or activities for Easter in the past, because Easter was fixed on Sunday, the students could usually go to Traveler's Street, where a lot of Easter eggs were laid out, to experience the festive atmosphere. Moreover, the halfling chefs in the cafeteria would also specially prepare Easter eggs for the students. Of course, the Easter eggs here were real eggs. The halfling chefs would paint all kinds of eggs with edible pigments and then boil them. On Easter morning, the students could harvest the first Easter egg of the day in the cafeteria. Of course, the halfling chefs would also bury a surprise in the egg, which was another kind of fun. Dake had heard of such a thing, so he prepared to go to the cafeteria for breakfast. Today's students woke up unexpectedly early. When Dake tidied up his clothes, took his card bag, and pinned the dueling club's badge on his chest, he went to the common room. He found that the common room, which usually only had a few people at this time, was already filled with a lot of people. Most of the people here were waiting for their classmates and friends to go to the cafeteria together. Dake thought for a while and found a seat to sit down. The little devil beast jumped from his shoulder onto the table and walked back and forth. After a while, the sleepy Luo came down with Deanna. "Slow down, the Easter eggs won't grow wings and fly away. I want to eat it early." The two walked to the middle of the common room, and Deanna suddenly noticed Dake, who stood up. Her eyes lit up and she waved to greet him. Dake shook his head slightly, and she immediately shut her mouth. Then the three of them naturally gathered together. "Let's go eat the Easter eggs together. I wonder if there's any toffee-flavored ones." "I don't know, but I heard there's a spicy one. There's also the possibility of eating a phoenix egg." Pfft. 2 in 1 4100 plus 12200/12000. Author, thank you for your hard work. Here are the tickets. Ah, you haven't written today's? Then it's fine. Chapter 376. The morning light shone into the castle, illuminating the shadows. Dake was in a good mood and felt that the air was much fresher. Chatting with Deanna always gave him a different kind of pleasure. The joy of a young girl was unusually infectious. People couldn't help but smile. Amidst the light laughter, the three of them unknowingly arrived at the cafeteria. Perhaps because they arrived early enough, the cafeteria wasn't full to the brim with people. However, the joyous atmosphere unique to the festival had already overflowed. Dake had just stepped into the cafeteria when he suddenly saw a delightful scene playing out in the aisle. A senior from the Night Academy with a red rose in his mouth was kneeling on one knee and confessing to another senior from the Magic Academy in front of everyone. Remember the URL, MFIP, can't you? 6.5 months ago, it was White Day, but he chose to confess on Easter. The senior from the Night Academy, who was immersed in his desire to perform, recited a mushy poem like the main character in an opera. Fortunately, he was quite handsome. Even such old-fashioned behavior attracted a lot of attention. The senior from the Magic Academy who was being confessed to changed from being surprised at the beginning to blushing and being shy. However, when the senior reached out her slender white hand to the senior, as if to accept the senior's confession, something unexpected happened. The senior from the Night Academy didn't grab the senior's finger and give her a kiss of promise. Instead, he suddenly stood up, revealed a bright and cheerful smile, and said tenderly, "Happy April Fool's Day." As soon as he finished speaking, even the onlooking students were stunned. Not to mention the senior from the Magic Academy who was blushing slightly. Slap. The senior from the Magic Academy suddenly realized that she had been fooled, and the blush on her face instantly turned into an angry red. She raised her right hand and fiercely slapped the senior. The sound of this slap was extremely crisp. It was obvious that the senior didn't show any mercy in her anger. But what was even more surprising was that the man who was being slapped actually laughed. Yes, he actually laughed and left the scene. This was supposed to be a scene that would cause social death, but in the context of April Fool's Day, it was slightly different. The onlookers seemed to have only just realized that today was not only Easter, but also April Fool's Day. All of them had strange expressions on their faces, and were on guard against their companions. As for the senior who was at the center of the incident, she returned to her seat after slapping him. When Dake walked past her, he saw that she was smiling too. Moreover, he was laughing very happily. It was as if she had already seen through the senior's acting. She had deliberately cooperated with him from the beginning, so that she could vent her anger with this slap. As expected of the Mage Institute, Dake looked away and pretended not to know anything. After this small episode, the atmosphere in the cafeteria dropped significantly. However, with the influx of more students, the gossip caused by this caused even more excitement. Dake and the other two lined up obediently. A few minutes later, it was finally their turn. Deanna and Luosi each chose a colored egg. Dake followed closely and reached out to choose one as well. The colored eggs placed on the plate were all different in terms of pattern and size. It was impossible to tell what kind of eggs they were from just looking at them from the outside. It was even more impossible to tell what had been done inside. Deanna chose the biggest one. Luosi chose one with a brighter color. Dake chose the roundest one. However, when he placed the egg on the plate and was about to leave, the halfling chef kindly said, "Little bat, don't you want to choose one?" The little fiend that was obediently standing on Dake's shoulder and mimicking a waistcoat suddenly cried out in surprise. But then, its surprise turned into joy. It stretched out its wings and pointed at the rows of colored eggs. "Thank you, Auntie." Dake thanked the halfling chef Auntie on behalf of the little fiend. Then, he followed the little fiend's guidance and chose a black-colored egg. Then, the three continued to order breakfast and sat down at an empty table near the wall with their plates. "I'm going to open it." Deanna energetically picked up the table knife and gestured at the egg in front of her. She was obviously impatient. "Open it, let's do it together." Dake also put the little fiend's egg on the plate and gave it to her. Then he picked up his own egg. The three of them looked at each other and began to move. The table knife in Diana's hand swung down fiercely. A silver light flashed, and the egg that was slightly bigger than a goose egg was cut in half. As the egg separated into two halves, white sticky honey trickled out. A strong licky fragrance burst out, causing Deanna to show a greedy look. "It's really sugar." The halfling chef didn't know how he did it. He actually replaced the egg's yolk with honey. While Deanna was pleasantly surprised, Luosi and Dake both used the traditional way to crack the eggshell and peel it. In short, the moment the eggshell was peeled, Luosi was stunned on the spot, because the egg in her hand really exuded a spicy smell. Even the egg white was red with chili oil dripping. "It really has a spicy flavor," Luosi said with a bitter face. She wanted to cry. Dake's egg was also opened. It was a more ordinary boiled egg, but they didn't know what kind of bird's egg it was. They were a little slow. The little fiend waited until the three of them opened the egg. Then, it used its claws to grab the black egg and knocked it on the table. Then cracks appeared on the eggshell. Ding! A crisp sound that was different from the boiled egg suddenly came from inside. Immediately after, the black-colored egg suddenly exploded. Boom! The explosion was so sudden that the three of them at the table turned their heads in a flash. A white light burst out from the exploded egg and rushed into the sky in a flash. The magic power that was gathered exploded in the air, blooming with 7 colored flashes. It was as gorgeous and colorful as fireworks. At this moment, everyone in the cafeteria was attracted to it. The little fiend raised its head and stared blankly at the blossoming fireworks with a dumbfounded expression. What a lucky little thing. The halfling chefs looked at the fireworks that were still blooming and couldn't help but reveal a gentle smile. Perhaps the little fiend itself didn't notice, but its appearance really brought a lot of joy to the busy chefs. The halflings were really fond of this little familiar that had a hint of intelligence. After a full half a minute, the gorgeous magic fireworks finished releasing. Dake poked the little fiend's face and said with a smile, "Why are you still in a daze? Quickly look at what's inside the egg." Oh! The little fiend suddenly came back to its senses and immediately cracked open the egg in front of it with a smile. Inside the egg, there was an empty firework ball and a ticket that was rolled up to the size of a little finger. "What is this?" "It's a prize ticket." Dake and Deanna's voices sounded at the same time. Obviously, Deanna understood the mechanism of the cafeteria's Easter egg better than Dake. Deanna looked at the prize ticket and said with envy, "Quickly let your familiar open it. I heard that the first prize is a phoenix egg." "How much do you want to eat a phoenix egg?" Dake couldn't help but roll his eyes. The little fiend had already spread out the prize ticket with its claws, and then stared at it for a long time with a puzzled expression. Dake curiously went over to take a look and suddenly said in surprise, "It's actually a credit certificate?" Luosi asked, "How many credits?" Dake, "That's not a small amount, a whole 200 credits." Deanna counted with her fingers and said, 200 credits, a guaranteed minimum of 10 credits per class, 14 classes per week, and all of them are only 140 credits. 200 is really a lot. But, Luosi also blinked and said, "But what's the point of having credits? Also, it doesn't have a school card." Dake laughed. "Familiars also have things they want, it's a good thing to have credits. As for not having a school card, I'll just keep it. Isn't that right, little fiend?" The little fiend immediately picked up the prize ticket and obediently handed it to its master. Of course, under its calm appearance, there was an unending surge of ecstasy. After being the first to obtain a little red flower, it had become the first magic guide elf to obtain credits. Although it could use the little red flower to exchange for what it wanted from its master, how could it be as good as being able to buy whatever it wanted? When the time came, it could even take the opportunity to go shopping with its master. Wouldn't that be perfect? While it was immersed in its beautiful fantasy, it suddenly heard Dake murmur, "After the Easter holidays, I can ask Professor Ka-Zayer to make a simplified version of the school card." The little fiend's expression suddenly changed. It couldn't hold back anymore. School card equals wallet. Was it a better wallet or the right to go shopping together? This was a difficult question. Until Dake took the prize ticket and exchanged it for 200 credits from the halfling anti-chef, the little fiend was still pondering over this difficult question. During this time, many students had obtained all kinds of gadgets from the Easter eggs. There were different amounts of credit vouchers, semi-finished magic guide cards, and some small magic tools. Of course, there was no phoenix egg. While some unlucky person who ate the wasabi boiled egg screamed, Dake and the other two briskly left the cafeteria. There was still more than an hour before the Easter Duel Festival started at 8:30. The three prepared to go to Traveler's Street to enjoy the scenery. In fact, Dake wanted to see the model Easter eggs. Deanna and Luosi had other shopping plans. When they arrived at the pavilion in the middle of the lake, the three chose a stone table and sat around it, waiting for the teleportation hub to turn around. Dake looked at Luosi and curiously asked, Aren't you going to participate in the qualifier? Even if you don't want to qualify, it's good to experience it. Also, I think you have a chance. What chance do I have? Luosi blushed when he looked at her like this. I only have 2 main cards, one for defense and one for healing. I won't be able to get 10 credits. Also, I don't have 40 magic guide cards. After that, she added, I'll just cheer for you from the audience. Don't. Deanna quickly waved her hand and muttered, I'll go up and take a look. After the qualifier, I'll cheer for Dake with you. Remember to save me a seat. Luosi chuckled. Of course I won't forget. Dake shook his head helplessly. Even Deanna participated with the mindset of experiencing it, so most of the first years were probably the same. This time, it seemed that he would have to fight alone. When the teleportation hub turned around, the 3 of them twisted their bodies and arrived at the pavilion in the middle of the lake on the other side. They didn't know if many people had the same idea as them, but it was clearly only a little over 7 o'clock, but there were already people coming and going on Traveler's Street. Not far from the entrance, there was a temporarily set-up stall that was surrounded by people. It was obviously the place where Easter eggs were distributed. Let's go and take a look. Dake was interested and took the lead to squeeze into the crowd. The boss selling Easter eggs was a rather familiar-looking uncle, but they couldn't remember which shop he was from. He was about 40 years old, and had a white towel wrapped around his head. He had a square face and a Philistine expression as he enthusiastically promoted model Easter eggs to the students. But the students, who knew that credits were precious, were quite cautious. No matter how this uncle tried to entice them, they remained unmoved. Boss, can this Easter egg really open a simulation model of the Sky White Dragon? Suddenly, a student couldn't help but ask. The boss immediately said, Yes, you can open a Sky White Dragon for 10 credits. The student frowned and muttered, 10 credits? That's the minimum score for a lesson. If I can really draw a Sky White Dragon, I'll make a killing. Boss, I'll pick one. All right. The boss immediately lifted the white cloth covering the stall, revealing Easter eggs of different sizes and colors. The student clenched his teeth and looked for a long time before finally picking an Easter egg the size of an ostrich egg. This is it. Okay, I'll wrap it up for you now. No need, I'll open it directly. The student turned his head slightly, picked up a small hammer from the stall, and hit the Easter egg hard. Pa! The Easter egg that was worth 10 credits shattered with a sound. The characteristics of the Easter egg itself made the upper half of it more easily shattered. As the fragments of the eggshell scattered down, the model inside finally appeared in their vision. It was actually a lively carp-type magic guide sprite. It's actually a fortune koi. The exquisite model was as beautiful as red jade. The moment it came into contact with the air, it leaped up like a fish and sparkled under the sunlight. Congratulations! Congratulations! While the student was immersed in the unexpected surprise, the boss selling the Easter egg quietly pulled the mechanism of the stall. Immediately, ribbons and pieces of paper shot out, drenching the student's head. However, the student still had an excited look on his face. He carefully picked up the carp model and said, This can't be the fortune koi of Senior Roger, who has already graduated, right? He's my idol. The boss rubbed his hands and said, Congratulations, customer, this is a very rare model. I didn't expect the customer to get it on the first try. Student, luck. After saying that, he held the koi and walked away with an excited look on his face. The rest of the students who were watching him finally became eager to give it a try. One after another, there were people who couldn't help but buy the Easter egg. Dake picked up a model illustration book from the stall and looked at it. 2-in-1 4/100 plus. Chapter 377. The professionalism of the senior just now was commendable. His performance was decent and successfully aroused the customer's desire to spend. And these models that only took half a month to rush out were exquisite enough. Even if it wasn't a rare item, it wouldn't make people feel that it wasn't worth it. It was really exquisite, completely different from some crudely made figurines. Dake sighed at the craftsman's spirit of the Shung Malian Academy as he looked at the illustration handbook. As a whole, The school planned according to his suggestions. Not only did the illustration handbook indicate the star rating of the Magic Guide sprite, but it also ranked according to the popularity of the Magic Guide sprite. In the future, when the sales of this model Easter egg were spread out, they would also create a popularity poll and reset the popularity level according to the poll. Currently, there were only 5 popularity levels, marked by A, B, C, D, and E. For example, Sky White Dragon and Red Spine Black Dragon were both Magic Guide sprites with a popularity level A. Their rarity was also extremely high, and only 3 of them had been produced so far. Remember in a second. https://m. Vipcanshu. VIP among them, models that could move like magic chess were also called Magic Guide models, and were even rarer. As for the S-class above the A-class, super popular, and the F-class below the E-class failed. They were all part of the plan but had not been carried out. The S-class would most likely be adjusted from the A-class in the future, while the F-class would be selected from the E-class. It was worthy of its name. In addition, every region had a unique Magic Guide sprite model that could only be bought in that region. There were also Magic Guide sprites that were limited to festivals and could only be bought on special festivals. This Easter, there was a human-type Magic Guide sprite called Spiritual Light Priest that was very popular. Dake's eyes suddenly lit up. He stood up and showed the illustration handbook to the little fiend beast. Look at what I found. The little fiend beast, who was standing on Dake's shoulder like an owl, looked at the model illustration handbook with a puzzled expression. But after a while, its eyes widened. There was a little fiend beast on the illustration handbook. Probably because it had appeared in the competition, the Academy included it, who was originally a familiar, in the category of ordinary Magic Guide sprites. In addition to the little demon beasts, there was also a model of the Diru beast. However, the little devil beast quickly puffed up its cheeks because its popularity level was actually E. But the popularity level of the Dilu beast was D. Both of them had only appeared once in the official competition. So why was one of their popularity levels higher than the other? The little devil beast expressed its dissatisfaction. In its anger, it stuck close to Dark's ear and began to whisper. Dake was stunned. Are you sure? The little demonic beast nodded vigorously. Dake said helplessly, then you choose. Thus the little demonic beast jumped down from his shoulder and landed on the edge of the table. It looked at the rows of Easter eggs and began to choose. It wanted to make a model of itself. Hey! Deanna's little head popped out from under Dake's armpit, and she looked at the little devil beast with great interest. Do you want to buy Easter eggs? 200 credits can buy 20 of them. The little devil beast turned around and glared at her, its gaze becoming sharper. It carefully observed the Easter eggs on the stall. In just a short while, the number of Easter eggs on the table had decreased by more than half. Some of the Easter eggs had been bought, while some of them had been directly opened. The models of the students' Magic Guide fairies were also varied, but most of them were D or E grade, and only one was C grade. There were no B grade Magic Guide fairies like the Lucky Koi at all. After discovering this point, the little fiendish magical beast was instead relieved. There weren't many types of Magic Guide fairies in the illustrated handbook, only about 50 to 60 types, and its own model was only E grade, which was the most numerous. In theory, it should be very easy to open one. After a long while, the little devil beast pointed at one of the Easter eggs with a serious expression on its face. It was the same Easter egg as the one it got when it drew the middle school voucher, which was mainly black. It thought that the black color was its lucky color. Is this the one? Dake asked again. The little devil beast nodded solemnly. Dake paid 10 credits, then took out the Easter egg and placed it in front of the little devil beast. The little devil beast stood on one leg, grabbed a small hammer with its other paw, and hit the top of the Easter egg with force. Pa! The Easter egg's shell shattered inch by inch. A brand new model appeared in front of everyone. Congratulations. Congratulations. Just as everyone was stunned, the boss suddenly pulled the mechanism, and immediately, ribbons and paper shot out from above, drenching the little devil beast. The little devil beast looked at the ribbons hanging on its wings with disgust, and shook them off with force. But when the other students looked at it, They all revealed envious gazes. C-grade magic guide fairy. Giant monster. As a top existence among the 3-star magic guide fairies, Giant Monster was ugly and brainless, but it did have a certain amount of popularity. That was the popularity that the Giant Monster had accumulated over a long period of time. Naturally, it wasn't something that the Little Devil Beast and Diru Beast, who had only appeared once, could compare to. Speaking of which, the Diru Beast had only appeared once, and it was already very difficult for it to obtain a D-grade popularity rating. It was probably because of the Basti Beast's fame. As for why the Little Devil Beast, which was also one of the Basti Beast's fusion materials, didn't benefit from it, that would depend on the benevolent and the wise. Dake took out the Giant Monster model from the broken eggshell and put it into the bag with a smile. Anyway, the Little Devil Beast definitely wouldn't want this toy. When the model Easter egg became popular, he would sell it to the White, and he would be able to recoup the cost. Maybe he could even make a small profit. In short, Dake Deming had a small discovery today. The Little Devil Beast's luck seemed to be pretty good. The Little Devil Beast, who had failed to open the egg the first time, only clenched its teeth and began to choose the second egg. The students surrounding the stall curiously looked at the magic elf with rich expressions. The people who originally wanted to buy the egg also stopped and focused their gazes on the Little Devil Beast. Under everyone's gaze, the Little Devil Beast once again chose an egg. It was an egg with a strange pattern, and the eggshell had a face that looked very similar to the funny face expression. In short, Dake paid 10 credits as usual, and placed the egg in front of the Little Devil Beast. The Little Devil Beast took a deep breath. This time, it didn't even use a small hammer. It directly pressed down with its claws, and the eggshell above the egg was instantly crushed. Then it peeled off the eggshell, revealing the model inside. A-grade magic elf. Pure white dragon maiden. Isn't this the main force of the silver dragon maiden? Light and dragon dual attributes, subhuman species, pure white and aloof ice beauty, extremely rare pure white dragon maiden. Its popularity isn't much lower than the sky white dragon. Wait, I remember that the illustration handbook showed that its popularity was A-grade. Is it so easy to get an A-grade magic elf? Boss, give me an egg too. However, the boss blinked and rubbed the corners of his eyes hard. He was so surprised that he even forgot to activate the celebratory mechanism. What the hell? It's already very lucky to get a C-grade model on the first try, okay? But the second one is A-grade? Am I still going to do this business? While he was crazily complaining in his heart, he didn't forget to collect the money. The model of the pure white dragon maiden that was still in the eggshell was indeed exquisite. It had dragon horns on its head, a cold face, and a white battle robe on its body that clung to its graceful body, perfectly accentuating its figure. A long spear was slanted behind its back, and it was as red as blood. It emitted a fierce battle intent. Although it wasn't a magic elf model, the value of this pure white dragon maiden could be directly reflected from its appearance. In fact, Dake had a deep impression of this pure white dragon maiden. Senior Panduola had danced with it at the Halloween party. Then, during the experiment of refining the fusion card, she had also summoned the pure white dragon maiden. Dake had always felt that its spirituality was higher than ordinary magic elves. Even if its intelligence level wasn't 3.0, it should be comparable to a familiar's 2.5. Of course, Dake was very happy to be able to see that this model was an A-grade. Looking at the little fiend's disgusted look, Dake smiled and put the pure white dragon maiden into his bag. Do you want to buy another egg? Dake took the initiative to ask, his attitude much more enthusiastic. However, the little fiend stared at the egg on the stall. At this moment, it was deeply doubting whether its model was inside. It had spent 1/10 of its 200 credits, and it was already a little distressed. If it still couldn't get the next one, would it get the next one? And the next one? Then who would pay for the credits that were spent? The little fiend didn't have a channel to earn credits. Every bit spent was a little less. Therefore, the little fiend understood. It shook its head hard, and then thought of a brilliant plan. So, more than 10 minutes later, Dake bought a model of the little fiend beast, That was only an E-grade model, and wasn't cute at all. It only cost 10 credits. When the little devil beast got its model, it immediately beamed with joy. It wanted to enshrine this model on the top of the bookshelf in the bedroom, and let those magic elves who didn't respect their seniors know what was called envy, jealousy, and hatred. In this battle, the Little Fiend spent 30 credits and obtained an E-grade model of the Little Fiend Beast. The remaining 170 credits. Dake Dimming spent 0 credits and obtained a C-grade model of the Giant Monster and an A-grade model of the Pure White Dragon Maiden. It was a great victory. After this, although Deanna was also somewhat interested in the model Easter egg, she didn't buy anything because she had spent too much money today and was embarrassed. On the other hand, Luosi bought an Easter egg as a souvenir of Easter. She put the egg she bought into a bag and hung it on her arm. She didn't rush to open it. After that, the three strolled around Traveler's Street for a while, and then returned to the academy. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. Most of the Shungmalian students gathered and entered the Shungmalian open-air dueling hall. This huge building that looked like the Colosseum in Rome was like a dormant beast on the earth, revealing a fierce and savage aura. But after passing through the huge door that looked like a bloody basin, the fierce and savage aura suddenly weakened a lot. The human aura diluted the remnant savage aura from ancient times. Only the desire to fight that was engraved in the bones of living creatures remained unchanged. It wasn't the first time that Dake and the other two came to this dueling hall, but when they entered, they still felt their blood boiling. Not far from the door, the staff of the dueling club had set up a notice board in the middle. The club's head, William, and the vice head, Inia, were also personally involved. They were responsible for guiding the audience to the left passage, while the contestants had to go to the right. Because this Easter dueling festival had an unprecedented format of the qualifiers, there were no requirements for participation, so the number of contestants was far greater than before. Almost half of the students in the academy wanted to have some fun in the qualifiers, and a rough estimate showed that there were nearly 300 people. Given the size of the duel arena, it was naturally able to accommodate these 300 people. However, it was not easy to maintain order within the arena. Remember to save a spot for me. Deanna held Luosi's hand and reminded her again. Luosi lifted the egg in the bag and pushed her hand away. Okay, you should go. Maybe you can make it. How is that possible? Deanna glanced at the right passage. There were a lot of people participating in the competition, and there were a lot of very famous seniors. If you accidentally provoked them in the qualifiers, you could only accept the fate of leaving quickly. On the other hand, if you were lucky enough, you could avoid those people and quickly hunt down 10 magic elves to make it to the next round. But this time, there were too many people. The rule of 10 points to make it to the next round was very likely to be changed because of this. The specific rules would only be announced after the number of contestants was counted at 8:30 p.m. This included the number of points needed to make it to the next round, the specific number of contestants, etc. In short, although Deanna said that she wanted to experience it, she of course wanted to make it to the next round. Even if she was eliminated in the first round, it was still a precious opportunity to compete with the second and third years. The person beside her was leading every minute and second. If she wanted to catch up with him, she would have to pay a price. Deanna didn't want to be left behind too far. Wait for me, Dake. Dake waited until Deanna returned before walking into the contestants' passage with her. He looked at the contestants in groups of 3s and 5s around him, and wondered how the academy would solve the problem of off-site teams. Since it was a qualifier, if it wasn't messy, what kind of qualifier would it be? They'll probably distribute the contestants randomly and scatter them. But it's also possible that they didn't notice this problem. After all, it's the first time they tried this mode, so it's normal for there to be loopholes. Dake shook his head. Counter soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir. 2 and 1 4,000 plus. Chapter 378. While the Academy's Duel Festival was being organized, the Shungmalian duel halls around the world were already open to the public. The Shungmalian Academy's duel competition was one of the few that was hosted by humans, but it was also very popular in the territories of other subhumans. The estrangement between humans and subhumans gradually manifested after the end of the war. Only the Shungmalian Academy's reputation was still strong, especially in the newly built Freedom City in the former territory of the demon race, the home of the hybrids. The Shungmalian Academy, which didn't discriminate against hybrids, had always been regarded as a holy land. Every child dreamt of being able to enter the Shungmalian Academy. Apart from the capital of the human kingdoms, this Easter Duel Festival was the grandest one to be held in the Freedom City's Duel Hall. Cynthia St. Erdii was currently in Box 1 of the Freedom City's Duel Hall. She had been busy in the Freedom City for a long time. Since she had some free time today, she wanted to see how the Academy's Easter Duel Festival was going, and whether it could become a permanent event in the future. I say, Cynthia, is this really an idea that Earbook could come up with? Beside Principal Erdii, a woman with long hair as red as the rising sun was carefully observing the Easter egg in her hand, clicking her tongue in wonder. Suna, didn't I tell you? It's a student's idea. Principal Erdii reached out to pick up a strawberry and put it in her mouth. Her sparkling lips were slightly moist, and her pure silver hair was almost transparent like the moonlight. Website: https://m. Vipcanchu. VIP Susanna Montilfrey, the City Lord of the Free City, the heroine who forcibly built a city on this land where there were many things waiting to be done. Just like Professor Pawa Jones, she was a mixed-blood human who had the blood of giants. The student you're talking about, is it Yvette's son? City Lord Minterfolly crossed her arms in front of her chest and crossed her legs without hesitation. A hint of curiosity appeared on her slightly rough but still beautiful face. Sol Montilfrey, who had half of the giant bloodline, was a bit slimmer than Professor Cheongsi, who only had 1/16 of the giant bloodline. However, her heart was just as big, and her tender skin was full of power. At the mention of the Valkyrie's son, Montilfrey couldn't help but ask, "Is he really as outstanding as you say?" "I heard that." Principal Erdii smiled. Humans will change before and after they understand the world. As educators, we need to guide them correctly during this period. City Lord Monterfolly could not help but shake her head. "I hope so. Don't disappoint me." The principal of Erdii raised his head and looked at the audience below through the one-way mirror in the box. As the match was about to begin at 8:30, more and more spectators poured into the stadium. Many spectators were already attracted by the Easter eggs in the various districts. The price of 188 holy coins per egg could not stop their enthusiasm at all. Erdii immediately said, "I heard that he'll be participating in this competition. You can observe for yourself." Participating in the competition? City Lord Monterfolly was surprised. "Isn't he only in his first year?" Erdii said, "There's a new format for the Easter Duel Festival this time. Didn't you pay attention to it?" City Lord Monterfolly shook her head slightly. "I'm so busy all day. How can I have time to pay attention to this?" Knock, knock, knock. Knocking sounds from outside the box interrupted their conversation. City Lord Monterfolly frowned. She put down her crossed long legs and straightened her sitting posture. Principal Erdii smiled and said, "It's Aurora." City Lord Monterfolly's expression relaxed a little, then relaxed again. As the City Lord of the Freedom City, no matter what her nature was, she had to follow etiquette in front of outsiders. After all, she was the face of the Freedom City. People's impression of such a new city was largely dependent on the City Lord's personal charm. This made her unable to be as free as before after establishing the Freedom City. She could not be like Erdii, who maintained an impeccable appearance every minute and every second. "Come in." Aurora, who was outside the door, gently pushed the door open after hearing her mother's lazy voice. The originally locked door was easily pushed open. She tiptoed into the private room and closed the door. She didn't forget to lock it again. Then she continued to walk behind Principal Erdii and City Lord Monterfolly. She put down the tray in her hand and said obediently, "Good morning, Mother." "Good morning, Aunt Erdii." "Good morning, little Aurora." Principal Erdii turned around slightly and looked at the tray. On the silver tray engraved with simple patterns, A white ceramic teapot was emitting heat, and exquisite pastries were carefully stacked on the side. There were crystal-cold cakes that exuded the fragrance of mint, honey-colored cheesecake, tiramisu covered in chocolate sauce, and cookies with crushed walnuts, Erdii said in surprise. Little Aurora, did you make this yourself? Aurora nodded slightly. Her neat bangs covered her eyebrows and eyes, and a trace of blush appeared on her white and tender face that was as white as a freshly peeled egg. Unlike her mother, although she had a quarter of the giant's blood, she was born petite and dainty. Even her hair was white like Principal Erdei's, and not sunrise red like Susanna Montefiorelli's. However, it was slightly different from Principal Erdei's silver hair. Her hair was purer and more transparent, giving off a dreamy and ethereal feeling. Aurora Montefiorelli had clearly inherited more of her father's blood. Faced with Principal Erdei's question, she only gave a shy louder. Suddenly, City Lord Montefiorelli scolded. Aurora's face was red as she gave a forceful Only then did City Lord Montefiorelli put a walnut cookie into her mouth and said helplessly, I, Susanna Montefiorelli, had the title of Sun Warrior. How did I give birth to a daughter like the moon? Aurora said shyly. How am I like the moon? City Lord Montefiorelli glared at her. Look at you. How are you like my daughter? If others saw you, they would think that you're Erdei's child. Aurora couldn't help but twist a lock of her hair and said softly, You can't blame me. Then blame me? City Lord Montefiorelli couldn't help but snort coldly. Principal Erdei smiled and waved at Aurora. Little Aurora, don't mind your mother. Come sit with Auntie. Aurora glanced at her mother and said softly, No, I'll sit with Mother. After saying that, she walked to the seat next to the City Lord and sat down. She was as elegant as a noble lady. City Lord Montefiorelli didn't look like her daughter at all. However, deep in her eyes, there was a strong sense of love. She pretended not to care and said casually, Aurora, watch the competition. You'll be entering school in the second half of the year. I hope you can join the dueling club in your first year. Aurora nodded and then said with a red face, When I enter school, I'll be able to see him. TSK. City Lord Montefiorelli turned her head and didn't want to say anything. She also didn't tell her daughter that she might be able to see the person she wanted to see in a while. The sun was just right in the Freedom City. However, the kingdom's capital was shrouded in dark clouds. Inside the carriage, First Princess Elisha looked at the sky outside the window worriedly. The Easter proclamation this time was really full of troubles. She didn't know if it would go smoothly. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but look in the direction of the Shungmalian dueling hall. I really want to go. Not only Yelvet and Claire but even Anna and Anchi went. Only she had to continue moving forward. However, as a human, she had to bear some burdens. Shungmalian dueling hall. Yelvet St. Dimming and Claire Kate had already entered the audience seats and sat down in advance. The two little princesses sat on either side of Claire and teased the fat cat. With the Valkyrie and the Sage of Beasts by their side, they could confidently refuse the company of those annoying guards. Now they were in a good mood. Meow. The fat cat named Galileo struggled to get up, but Anna and Anchi each pulled one of its ears. It could only helplessly meow miserably. Is Elisha okay? Claire asked worriedly. Yelvet didn't care. She has to learn to face it alone. We can help her now, but we can't help her forever. And she looked up and giggled. Aunt Claire, there's nothing to worry about. Sister can do it. Anna also said. One of them is in the east, and the other is in the west. They won't confront each other directly. It's okay. Claire said helplessly. What are you two little guys thinking? What else can we think? Anna and Anchi said at the same time. If brother wins, we'll be a quiet little princess. If sister wins, we'll be a lively little princess. Claire couldn't help but laugh. You two have thought it through. Unfortunately, things change, and things don't always go as planned. You two are still young, so you don't have to worry about these things. Anna and Anchi pretended not to hear it. After playing for a while, Anna suddenly looked up and said, Aunt Claire, let's go buy eggs together, okay? I want a magic model of the Sky White Dragon. And she immediately said, Yes, we have to hurry. I heard that there are only 3 models of this sky white dragon, and only one of them is a magic model that can move. If it's taken away by someone else, it'll be gone. After saying that, the 2 little princesses tried to get up, but Claire pulled them back. Claire looked at Yelvet. Yelvet clapped her hands. A spectator sitting behind them immediately got up and left. After a while, the sweet-looking distributor walked over with a small cart. Rows of colored eggs were neatly placed on the car. 188 holy coins for one. Do you want to go first, or should I? Anna and Enchi's eyes became sharp at the same time as if they were on a battlefield. However, a white jade-like arm had already reached out and picked up a white Easter egg. Yelvet had also been thinking about opening the egg for a long time. Her goal was the Diru beast. Inside the Shungmalian Academy, in the open-air dueling arena, after Dake and Deanna walked into the contestants' passage, they followed the crowd. They didn't stop until a fork appeared in front of them. The staff guarding the fork was shouting, "First to 3rd years, please go to the left. 4th to 6th years, please go to the right." 2 staff members were registering the contestants' names, departments, and years. "Let's go to the left." Dake took Deanna to the left side of the line, and it didn't take long for their turn. The senior in charge of registration looked up and said, "Name, department, and year, and then draw an Easter egg." "Is there an Easter egg here?" Dake asked curiously. The senior chuckled and said, "In addition to the number plate, there's also a participation prize. Good luck." Dake looked at her smile, and for a moment, he wanted the little devil to help him draw an Easter egg. Of course, he didn't do that. Anyway, after registering, he took out an Easter egg the size of a tennis ball from a big jar, and put it aside for Deanna to register. Some of the students who had finished registering first crushed the Easter egg, and pulled out a credit voucher from it. They immediately made a big fuss. Another student in line next door pulled out a piece of green Oregon. He was stunned at first, but then he cried out in surprise. He was so excited that he couldn't control himself. The other students in the line, especially the 1st and 2nd years who emphasized participation, all started to discuss excitedly. Before coming here, no one thought that there would be a participation prize. Hey! After registering, Deanna immediately took out an Easter egg from the big jar. She saw that Dake hadn't opened it, so she couldn't help but ask, "Together?" Dake nodded and said, "Together." So the 2 of them used their strength at the same time. The Easter egg in Deanna's hand was instantly crushed. A round number plate and a hexagonal gemstone fell out from it. Deanna picked up the gemstone and said in surprise, "Dake, look what I got." The gem emitted a fiery red light, illuminating her face and making it look bright red. But if one looked closely, one would find that there was a little shadow hidden in the center of the gemstone. The other students in the line were attracted by the gemstone, and they all looked envious. "Congratulations, congratulations." Dake congratulated while looking at the Easter egg in his hand that only had a thumbprint on it. He silently continued to crush it. In the end, he finally crushed the Easter egg, but he only got a number plate and a gray stone. He picked up the stone and looked at it for a while. He really couldn't tell what it was, so he had to put it away. White Gouda on the other side of the line also finished registering. He looked at the gemstone in Deanna's hand with envy, and also took out the Easter egg from the jar on the other side. He then squeezed it open with both hands. "This is a 10 credit voucher?" White was surprised. "Good luck." 4000/12,000. Chapter 379. After walking for about 2 to 3 minutes, they could see a very spacious waiting room for the contestants. The contestants from the 1st to 3rd years entered one after another. Dake and Deanna also entered after receiving their number plates. The 2 found 2 empty seats and sat down, whispering to each other. The number of contestants was displayed on the wall of the waiting room. Up until now, there were more than 80 contestants from the 1st to 3rd years who had completed their registration. It was estimated that they would soon break through the 100 mark. This was already a lot compared to the total number of contestants from the 3 years who were less than 500. With such a large number of contestants, it was inevitable that the rules of the competition would be adjusted. Dake looked around and found that more and more familiar faces appeared in the waiting room. The 7 contestants from the first years had all arrived. In addition, there were many students who had forcibly gathered 40 magic cards to experience the battle royale. Many people had squeezed into Dolong's small circle. At this time, they were laughing in the corner. Remember the URL? MVIP can't you? VIP at the Knights Institute. White Gouda was sitting with another contestant from the Knights Institute, Justin Wayne, but the two didn't seem to have much to talk about. The atmosphere was a bit stiff. There was no sign of Luo Boat Broheim in the waiting room. It was obvious that he hadn't successfully gathered 40 magic cards. Dake was originally quite optimistic about him. After all, the magic card left by the vampire Vlad was still in his hands. If he could successfully summon the vampire count in the battle royale, then Luo Boat would most likely be able to easily qualify. Unfortunately, he didn't seize this good opportunity to show off. Dake's gaze turned and noticed that Ai Ma Modis was with a group of third-year seniors. One of the seniors had a ponytail and looked valiant. She was a member of the literature club who had a good relationship with Ai Ma, Helena Tracy. In addition, Angelia Hudson and Winnie Scuti, who were also from the literature club, were also nearby. Dake vaguely remembered that Winnie Scuti had accepted the princess's invitation on Halloween and danced with her. She seemed to be the descendant of a certain sage, and her grades in the 3rd grade were among the top. At the mention of the descendants of the wise ones, Dake couldn't help but shift his gaze to Saraswati. This dark-skinned girl was as eye-catching as ever. As he looked around, Dake suddenly felt a sharp gaze. He subconsciously turned around and saw Senior Mike Owen, who had a street duel with him on Valentine's Day, chatting with a group of men and women in a corner not far behind him. Is he a member of the Aristocratic History Society? At that moment, Dake and one of the boys' eyes met. However, when the boy realized what was going on, he immediately turned his head and pretended to chat with her to avoid her gaze. Such a guilty move immediately made Dake vigilant. On Valentine's Day, Senior Owen challenged me to a duel with a flawed excuse. This time, someone is up to no good again. Could it be that my refusal to join their club triggered their revenge? But that was more than a month ago. Besides, if it's really because of this reason, isn't it too petty? Dake shook his head, indicating that he didn't understand and was too lazy to think about it. After a few more minutes, the number of people displayed on the wall finally stopped. 1st to 3rd grade, 132 people. 4th to 6th grade, 171 people. In the end, there were actually more than 300 people. Among the 1st to 3rd grades, it was mainly because of the number of 1st grades that dragged them down, resulting in them not being as good as the 4th to 6th grades. The students' enthusiasm for the audition was beyond imagination. After the number of participants was confirmed, the final rules of the competition were adjusted. Enia Knight, the vice head of the duel club, who was in charge of the 1st to 3rd grades, clearly explained the final rules of the competition. This year's Easter Duel Festival is divided into high and low grade groups. 1st to 3rd grades are the lower grade group. As of now, there are a total of 132 people. The competition is divided into 2 rounds. The first round is the audition, and the second round is the main competition. As you know, the audition uses a chaotic battle mode that has never been used before. According to your number plate, we will set up a predetermined position around the circular field. When the time comes, please go to the corresponding contestant position according to your number plate, and wait for the competition to begin. The rules of the audition battle are very simple. With the circular field as the boundary, you can summon any magic spirits and use magic cards, but you can't go beyond the boundary and can't attack contestants from outside the boundary. If you accidentally injure a contestant from outside the boundary, you will be immediately disqualified. The competition will be based on the number of magic spirits killed. Every magic spirit killed will add 1 point, and every magic spirit killed will deduct 1 point. Magic spirits that can be divided will be counted as 1 point. The points of all contestants will be displayed on the big screen in real time. The normal competition will last for half an hour. The competition will be changed from a point system to a time system. The final ranking will be based on points. The top 8 contestants with the most points will directly advance to the main competition. The main competition will use a single elimination system. The loser will leave the stage and the winner will advance. The competition between the two groups will be held in intervals. In this competition, only one contestant will be the winner of this group. The Academy has prepared a golden Easter egg for the winner. Understood. The rules of the competition were very simple and easy to understand. Dake only heard half of it and already guessed the rules. He was only surprised that the point system had been changed to a time system. The point system was to limit the points. Once a contestant reached a certain point, they would be able to advance. This way, the contestants with the highest points would leave the stage during the competition period, and the remaining contestants would have more opportunities to hunt for points. The time system would gradually turn into a hunting ground for the contestants with the highest points. This would cause the contestants with the highest points to continue hunting for higher points. It would also make the whole competition more intense. If one wanted to win, they would have to race against time from the beginning. As for which competition system was better, it was hard to say which one was better or worse. As one of the 303 contestants, all Dake could do now was to follow the competition system and perform within the scope of the competition system. However, the appearance of the number plates caused the positions of the students to be disrupted. To a certain extent, it reduced the influence of teams outside the field. There was also a real-time scoring system, which took care of the contestants and the audience at the same time. It was very good. Another thing to pay attention to was the reduction in the number of qualifiers. Originally, there were 2 groups with a total of 32 contestants, but now there were only 8 contestants in each group. This would make the competition even more intense. It would be even more difficult to advance. However, it was easy to think of the reason for reducing the number of contestants. After all, it was a festival competition, so the arrangement of the venue shouldn't be too tight. It was more suitable to have a match every half an hour. There would be 2 matches in an hour, and there would be a gap in between to interview and introduce the contestants. This would allow the audience to know more about the contestants, and it would be convenient for, well, to attract fans. In this way, there would be a total of 12 matches in the competition, and the duration would be 6 hours. In addition, there would be the opening ceremony, the curtain call, and the 2 qualifiers. There would still be time for lunch. The competition would end at dusk. Perfect. Dake pondered for a moment, and roughly understood the competition schedule. When he finished thinking and raised his head, the 4th-year senior, Emiya Knight, was already calling the contestants to enter. Because it was held in a hurry, the opening ceremony of the Easter Duel Festival was very simple. There were only a few minutes of speeches and a school students' war dance performance, which added up to less than 15 minutes. When the students' war dance ended with the sound of the drums, the 1st-year to 3rd-year contestants who entered the venue first were led into the arena. It was only at this time that the 132 contestants saw the stage of the qualifier for the first time. It was a standard circle with a diameter of more than 200 meters, but there was no contestant stage. The problem caused by the absence of a contestant stage was very obvious. The height of the contestants' geographical location would limit their vision, and they would not be able to look down at the entire venue. The limitation of their vision would also cause them to only be able to dispatch magic elves near them. This would affect the entire strategic layout. However, many people participated in this qualifier with the mentality of having fun. The so-called strategic layout might very well be aborted on the spot because of this. As a 1st-year student, Dake and Deanna walked behind the 2nd and 3rd years when they entered the venue. I keep feeling that there are so many people. As soon as Deanna came out, she was shocked by the dense audience. She had only experienced the newcomer competition once. Although there were many spectators in the morning, there were many empty seats in the audience. But this time, it was crowded and noisy, especially in 2 of the large areas. There was almost no empty seat. Tens of thousands of spectators were in different branches, but their projections were gathered in one venue. The scene was unprecedentedly grand. Deanna wanted to try hard to find her parents like last time, but there was not much to see on the flat ground. She sighed slightly, but soon became happy when she found Luosi cheering for her. At the same time, Dake also found Panduola in the ring. But unlike Deanna, he immediately found his mother in the first row, as well as Claire and the two little princesses. Arvet was playing with a white model. Because it was too far away, he could not see the specific appearance of the model clearly. Claire was still hugging the fat cat. The two little princesses were pulling and tugging at each other. There was a pile of models next to them. He did not know if any of them had opened the magic conducting spirit that he liked. All contestants, please find the corresponding contestant position as soon as possible after entering the venue. All contestants, please find the corresponding contestant position as soon as possible after entering the venue. The host's repeated announcements made Dake regain his attention. He looked at Deanna and encouraged her. Next, you have to work hard. Deanna said, yes, you have to work hard too. Dake reached out his hand and high-fived her. Then they walked in different directions. It did not matter if they won or lost. They would do their best. 2 minutes later, Dake found his contestant position. His number was 77. It was a lucky number for him. After he stood in his contestant position, contestant number 76 and contestant number 80 arrived one after another. The numbers were randomly drawn, so the numbers were not perfectly connected. But the contestant numbers were arranged from the smallest to the largest. On Dake's left was contestant number 76, and on his right was contestant number 80. Unfortunately, they were two unfamiliar seniors. However, contestant number 76 was wearing a second-grade uniform, and contestant number 80 was wearing a third-grade uniform. The big fish ate the small fish. If he wanted to increase his score efficiently, he had to start with the second-grade seniors. Dake narrowed his eyes and thought quickly. On the other side, contestant number 6 Deanna and contestant number 4 White became neighbors. White felt a little relaxed because there was a student of the same grade next to her. Deanna, however, was thinking about the big fish eating the small fish. The 10 or so first years were scattered between the second and third years. Most of them were like trembling little lambs, surrounded by a pack of wolves. Zach Wilson, who was lucky enough to be the commentator for the lower grade group, stood on the commentary platform and looked at the whole venue. Although Wilson's father was a viscount with no real power, so he was in the middle and lower ranks of the aristocratic History Research Society, he was a very popular member of the Duel Club. He had a lot of experience as a commentator, and this time he was not here because he was ordered to. In fact, because he was not biased in the last rookie competition, he was now swept to the bottom by the Aristocratic History Research Society's president, Jeffrey, and became a very unpopular part of the society. Wilson, who was originally in the same faction as Jeffrey because his father was in the First Prince's faction, lived a more comfortable life after losing the chance to do so. He relied on his own ability to win the position of commentator for this year's Battle Royale. He was in a good mood as he looked at the whole venue. If he could be a good person, who would want to be a dog? I don't know if Dake Dimming will be lucky enough to win this time. In the audience, when the names of the 132 contestants were fully projected on the big screen, the audience, who had come specifically for certain people, couldn't wait to search for the name in their hearts. The second and third grades were already able to participate in the official competition, and some students had already gained a lot of fans. But in addition to the fans, there were also many parents who wanted to take the opportunity to see their children. Although the Shung Malian Academy was a very ideal place for education, it was not convenient for their children to write letters to each other for a whole year. It was inevitable that the parents would miss their children. Thinking that his daughter might also participate this time, Viscount Greatbell and his wife mixed in the crowd and counted the names on the big screen. Deanna Greatbell. My dear, I found her. Where is she? Where is she? Viscount Greatbell said excitedly. In the last rookie competition, his precious daughter had defeated a second-year senior as a first-year student. As a father, he could hold his head up high for a moment. As soon as he walked out, he was complimented by like father, like son, which was completely different from the honorable defeat of the Dolan family's child. It was just that when he was watching the competition last time, he accidentally shouted too loudly, and seemed to have offended the eldest prince, Charles. With the mentality of not wanting to cause trouble, Viscount Greatbell decided to keep his mouth shut this time. After all, the Valkyrie sitting in the front row was very eye-catching. Viscount Greatbell wanted to exchange compliments with the Valkyrie, but the Viscount's wife always said that she would do it for him during the tea party. But could she do it for him? The Great Bear sighed. At the same time, Yvette found her son's name on the big screen, and immediately smiled. The two little princesses complained that they couldn't get the Sky White Dragon, while looking for Dake Dimmung. But under the layers of cover, it wasn't easy to find him. Claire looked at the competition rules on the big screen and said seriously, "These rules are quite interesting." Yvette stopped smiling and said, "It looks disorderly, but it's orderly. If this mode is more formal, it will become a competition of connections. Only those who know how to cooperate in the competition can win. But the contestants in this competition are quite mixed. Obviously, it's mainly for entertainment and depends more on luck." Claire smiled and said, "I wonder if Dake's luck is good enough?" Yvette frowned and said gloomily, "This child's luck hasn't been good since he was a child." Third Princess-in-Chi, who was sitting between Claire and Yvette, was amused. "Yes, I remember that he always loses at rock, paper, scissors." Second Princess Anna immediately said, "Aren't you the same? I'm the only winner." And she was unhappy. "You're annoying. We're 50-50. Freedom City. Duel Hall." In the private room, City Lord Montierfolly also found Dake Dimung's name on the big screen. Sure enough, he participated. She tapped the armrest with her fingertips and said to Headmaster Aertii, "Cynthia, I want to take a closer look at him." "No problem." Headmaster Aertii pointed with his finger, and a fluorescent light flew out from his fingertips and entered the one-sided mirror. In theory, there were no private rooms in the Shung Malian Academy's open-air duel hall. Only the headmaster himself could set up a private room and connect it to the projection presented by the duel hall. The sprite worm she released searched around the projection and flew back with a buzzing sound. Then it exploded into a firework and turned into an oval mirror. Dake Dimung's figure appeared in the mirror. City Lord Montierfolly frowned slightly and looked carefully. Aurora, who was beside her, opened her eyes slightly. This son of the Valkyrie had perfectly inherited the hair color of the Valkyrie. His facial features were as delicate as a doll's. If it weren't for the fact that there were too many rumors about him, he would definitely be an existence that could make women fall in love at first sight. Too thin and weak. City Lord Montierfolly was clearly dissatisfied. "Yarvette is a Valkyrie. How can she raise such a delicate child? How can such a delicate child be worthy of my little moon?" Aurora said in a low voice. "It's okay, I'll be gentle." City Lord Montierfolly immediately glared at her. Dake Dimung's pretty face was indeed very bewitching. Ordinary little girls simply couldn't resist it. However, her daughter naturally couldn't be so superficial. Aurora was particularly concerned about the Valkyrie's son, but it was also her fault. After getting drunk after being busy and relaxing, she accidentally let it slip and exposed the infant betrothal between the two. Originally, this so-called infant betrothal was casually decided by the two mothers while chatting. At that time, Montierfolly just had the intention of building a city, but she suffered from a lack of connections and resources. Thus, she found her most trustworthy comrade, the Valkyrie Yarvette. Yarvette was such a gentle person. After learning that Montierfolly's purpose of building a city was to accommodate the discriminated mixed bloods, she didn't hesitate to agree. At that time, the war had only ended a few years ago. The Duke's mansion was also licking the wounds left behind by the war. Their inventory was also very tight. Yarvette's unhesitation in choosing to support Montierfolly at that time made Montierfolly very touched. She just happened to see the two half-grown children sticking to each other on a small bed, so she impulsively proposed this infant betrothal. Yarvette knew that doing so would make her comrade feel slightly more at ease, so she agreed. However, neither side was too serious about it. After Montierfolly successfully built the city, she also provided great returns to the Duke's mansion. If neither side mentioned it, as the children of both sides gradually grew up, this infant betrothal would most likely only exist in name. Unfortunately, City Lord Montier Folly accidentally exposed this matter when her daughter was 5 years old. From then on, Aurora, who was already sensible at the age of 5, knew that she had such a fiancé. Although they didn't see each other after growing up, news circulated quickly in the Freedom City. Aurora could occasionally inquire about things related to him from the maids beside her. Slowly she learned of his name, his naughtiness, and those specious rumors. But what did that matter? Wasn't it fine as long as he was good-looking? A bad personality could be nurtured. Aurora actually knew what this infant betrothal was all about. However, from her perspective, if the marriage could be smoothly arranged, the burden on her mother's shoulders would immediately lighten. The establishment of the Freedom City was only the beginning. The development afterwards was the key. As a new city built in the territory of the demon race, its development was bound to be full of difficulties and obstacles. For her mother, for the city, for all the mixed bloods, the Valkyrie's support was necessary. Of course, Aurora wasn't that great. She was only doing it for her mother. In short, it was indeed like this at the beginning. That was her idea when she was 5 years old. At that time, Aurora's goal was to become the wife behind a successful man. However, as she gradually grew up, her understanding of the relationship between men and women became clearer. She was too embarrassed to speak about this goal. The trace of utilitarianism at the beginning also gradually faded as she grew older. City Lord Montier Folly always told her the road was her own, and she had to rely on her own 2 feet to walk. Always thinking of taking advantage of others, and relying on others was a sign of immaturity. After Aurora understood this principle, she cut out the first half of the wife behind a successful man, leaving only the second half of the wife. As long as she, as a wife, was capable enough, so what if her husband was trash? Yes, as long as she could be that kind of wife. Aurora had already habitually put herself in the role of a wife. Even though the two of them weren't actually engaged, and hadn't even seen each other after growing up. However, the current her already had the confidence to support any husband. No problem, Aurora. Aurora looked at her husband in the mirror and cheered in her heart. Good luck. Shung Malian Academy. Outdoor dueling arena. Dake Dimming didn't know that he was being watched. After all, other than occasionally joking, the Valkyrie wouldn't mention that matter at all. He was also a heartless person before, so he wouldn't pay attention to some words. Therefore, he had no impression of the so-called arranged marriage. However, even if he knew, he wouldn't change his mind because of this. The so-called fiancé was a popular character in the original game. However, it had nothing to do with the current him. Even if they got to know each other in the future, it would be after they got to know each other. He would do his best to deal with the demon god bloodline. Other than that, he hoped to be able to do as he pleased. It's about to start. All 132 contestants had already stood in their contestants' seats. The atmosphere in the arena gradually changed from the initial cheerful to solemn. No matter what kind of mentality one had when they came here. However, as long as they stood on the arena, they would realize that if they still had the mentality of having fun, they wouldn't just lose face. The audience's enthusiasm for the duel shocked the first-year students who were going on stage for the first time. The tsunami-like cheers replaced the accompaniment for the start of the competition. Being in the audience and being in the arena were two completely different experiences. Some of the first-year students were already trembling because of this. Dake Dimming also felt his blood gradually boiling. On the commentary platform, Zach Wilson waved his arms vigorously, trying to calm the audience down. However, his aura was obviously not enough to suppress the crowd. The commentary for the upcoming Battle Royale of the audition was also a big test for him. He had no choice but to shout as loudly as he could amidst the cheers. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, our contestants have already taken their positions. Whether it's the first-year students who have just entered the arena or the experienced third-year students, they are all standing on the same stage, praising the new duel mode. Here, I'll greet all the audience on behalf of them. Happy Easter. Happy Easter. Although there weren't many, there were still people who responded to Wilson's call. The blessings mixed in the cheers made Wilson secretly wipe his sweat. Happy my ass. However, there were also people who took the opportunity to curse. The president of the Aristocratic History Research Society, Angus Jeffrey, gritted his teeth in the ring. He even roared angrily in the crowd, "Kill him!" Several members of the Aristocratic History Research Society in the arena seemed to consciously glance in his direction. Some were indifferent, while others had bright eyes. Since the failure of Valentine's Day, the third-year Mike Owen had gradually fallen from being Jeffrey's trusted aide to a peripheral figure. Naturally, there was a vacancy by Jeffrey's side. No matter what, if they could replace Mike Owen's position and become Jeffrey's trusted aide, it would be beneficial in the short term. As for the long term, who would invest in the long term these days? In short, no matter how chaotic the qualifier was, no one would think it was wrong. Then take the opportunity to mess it up. There were 3 second-year students and 2 third-year students who took Jeffrey's suggestion seriously. And the one closer to Dake, number 74, second-year student. Only 2 people away from Dake. Second-year noble house, Oligo Ruther. The Ruther family was just a small, unknown family in the kingdom. The patriarch was only a baron. But they had a vast baronial territory, although most of it was wasteland. But recently, it seemed that minerals had been mined. Oligo Ruther had squeezed into the Aristocratic History Research Society because of this. This was an opportunity for him to climb the upper ladder, and he was working hard to grasp it. For the marginal nobles, if they could climb the upper ladder, it was an important way to improve their family status. The people on the upper ladder and the people on the lower ladder had completely different consulting and opportunities. This was the same in the noble circle. Moreover, the only capital the Ruther family had, a lot of land, was becoming worthless. With the acceleration of city construction, humans were going through the early stages of 1,000 things to do. It was believed that soon, humans would start to develop and reuse the demon territory. And the Freedom City, as an outpost, would also become a place to fight for. The Sun Warrior, Suna Montefiore, had indeed built a promising home for the hybrids. In short, for his own and his family's interests, Oligo Ruther was thinking of ways to trip up Dake Dimung. As for why he didn't simply defect to the Duke's son? On one hand, it was because he didn't have a way to defect. On the other hand, he had already joined the Aristocratic History Research Society. A person's vision was usually blocked by their environment. If he was in the Aristocratic History Research Society, but his heart was with an outsider, he probably wouldn't have a future. But how could he trip up Dake Dimung? If he deliberately targeted him, would he be misunderstood as having a problem with the Duke's family? If he attacked him too hard, would he anger the Duke's son and be privately retaliated against? The Ruther family couldn't bear the wrath of the Duke, even if it was just a spark. As a small noble, it was really difficult for Ruther. He was under a lot of pressure. As the competition was about to start, Dake Dimung took out 2 magic cards from his card bag and held them in his hand. There were no rules in the qualifier battle. Other than not being able to summon before the start of the competition, anything could be done. Therefore, he directly took out Spell Cage, Little Demon Beast and Pride 3. In the early stages of the qualifier battle, it was inevitable that whoever summoned a powerful magic fairy faster would be able to gain an advantage faster. High-star magic fairies and low-star magic fairies were all 1 point. Of course, he would choose the low-star magic fairy to hunt. And to deal with low-star magic fairies, there was nothing faster than Demon Beast. His gaze swept to both sides, ready to go. Ding-dong. As the bell rang, a huge countdown appeared above his head. 30s. 4 in 1 12000/12,000, monthly vote, recommendation vote, guaranteed blade 0/12,000. Chapter 380. 3S, 2S, 1S, 0S. The moment the countdown ended, the final number turned into a new countdown. 29, 59. A few seconds later, the entire stadium was filled with the awe-inspiring cries of the duelists. Magic summoning. Amidst the impassioned summoning cries, one magic fairy after another was summoned. 1 second to remember https://m. VIP can't you? It was rare to see such a grand scene where more than 100 magic fairies were summoned in one breath after the end of the war. Although the magic fairies summoned in the beginning were the first-tier magic fairies, quantity was justice. Seeing so many magic fairies appear at the same time, the audience almost immediately fell in love with this new duel mode. The contestants were also affected by the atmosphere. Many of them had excited looks on their faces. However, the world of magic duels was cruel. Almost half of the people's smiles came to an abrupt end in just a few seconds after summoning their magic fairies. Because their magic fairies were instantly killed right in front of their eyes. The attacks from the surrounding people came faster than expected. After Dake Dimming summoned Spellcage, Little Devil Magical Beast, he only waited for the 3-second cooldown before realizing that the attack from contestant number 80 on the right had already arrived. The third-year senior who only used the 3-second limit to summon his first magic fairy immediately chose to attack the first-year newbie, who looked easier to bully. Although Dake's performance in the newcomers competition was not bad, it did not change the fact that he was only a first-year student. The third-year senior chose the strongest and most agile 3-star magic fairy he had at the start of the duel. It was a steel serpent with wings. Card name, Steel Drill Snake. Type, Fairy card. Level, *****. Race, bird/beast. Attribute, steel/flight. Magic power, 1200 attack, 1500 defense, 1500, sure kill skills. Spiral steel drill gale sprint. The steel drill snake with steel wings on its back had a conical structure like a steel drill. It could rotate at high speed and had a first-rate armor-piercing ability. As for the sure kill skill Gale Rush, it could make good use of the energy of the flight type to increase the speed of the flying type to launch a fatal charge at the enemy. The moment the steel drill snake used Gale Charge on the Little Fiend, if Dake, the master of the Little Fiend, wanted to give orders, he would have to stop the second summon. Hence Dake chose to believe him. The little demon beast that carried the trust of its master reacted in time when it was targeted, flapping its wings and flying up. Its flying speed was far inferior to the steel drill snake's, but it was alert enough to escape. However, the steel drill snake didn't turn around to attack it. Instead, it attacked the magic elf of contestant number 76 on the left. The second-year student, who had also chosen to summon a 3-star magic elf, shouted the moment he discovered the steel drill snake. His 3-star magic elf, a horseman with a large shield, immediately raised its large shield and aimed it at the steel drill snake. Boom! The spear and shield collided at this moment. Card name, Horse-Headed Shield Guard. Type, Elf card. Level, *****. Race, subhuman. Attribute, combat magic power, 1300 attack, 1300 defense, 1600 ultimate skill, unwavering, explosion shield in an instant. The Horsehead Shield Guardian's body flashed with orange light. The activation of its sure kill skill, unwavering, gave it the ability to withstand more damage. The existence of the explosion shield also increased its defense by a large margin. Its basic defense value, which exceeded that of a 3-star peak, also gave it the ability to withstand powerful attacks. However, the flight specialization was a natural counter to the combat specialization. However, it was still forced back by the steel drill snake, as Gale Rush. As a result, it lost its balance, and the shield in its hand was raised high. The elemental restraints between magic guide fairies were something that was taught in the first year, but the real application would usually start in the second year. Fortunately, the attribute suppression in this world wasn't as obvious as in the Pokemon world, where it could easily double or triple. Depending on the race and energy nature of the various magic guide fairies, this kind of restraint would still fluctuate within a certain range. Therefore, effectively using elemental restraints to complete a sure kill was still a high-end application. The Steel Drill Snake's sure kill skill, Spiral Steel Drill, was stronger than Gale Rush in terms of power, but against the Horsehead Shield Guardian of the combat specialization, Gale Rush's effect was better. After it used Gale Rush to break through the Horsehead Shield Guardian's shield, it immediately changed to Spiral Steel Drill and attacked the Horsehead Shield Guardian's chest. A huge hole was drilled out of the sturdy chest. This battle was undoubtedly Mao's victory. However, just as contestant number 80 calmly prepared to summon the second magic guide fairy to deal fatal damage to the second-year student's magic guide fairy. Between contestant number 76 and contestant number 80, a dazzling dark golden light suddenly burst out. Being illuminated by that ray of light, contestant number 80 and contestant number 76 suddenly had a trace of abnormal emotion in their hearts. Contestant number 80's heart wavered. His gaze turned sharp, and the tone of his summoning changed because of this. "Come out, Steel Drill Snake. Let those fish-faced juniors know who's the real strong." The second Steel Drill Snake suddenly appeared in this condescending tone. Contestant number 76's body trembled, and he roared, "It's just a steel drill snake. How can it break through my defense?" Magic Guide Summon. Gold Armor Spell. The golden energy armor covered the body of the Horse Head Shield Guardian, and its already powerful defense was further enhanced. The Horse Head Shield Guardian with the golden armor looked like a mighty god of war at this moment. Its eyes flashed with the light of unwavering, and it raised its big shield again and launched a fierce shield attack at the Steel Drill Snake. Boom! The Steel Drill Snake screamed in pain from the attack. However, the appearance of the second Steel Drill Snake put the Horsehead Shield Guardian in a difficult situation. However, in the next moment, a huge and sharp claw of death suddenly descended from the sky and destroyed the Horsehead Shield Guardian. As defense, the claw of death pressed the Horsehead Shield Guardian as head to the ground. Demon Beast, Claw of Death. Dake Diming's voice sounded after that. The demon beast that activated its sure-kill skill let out a crazy laugh, and its other arm suddenly lengthened. The Claw of Death grabbed the head of one of the Steel Drill Snakes and pressed it to the ground as well. The two 3-star magic guide spirits were powerless in front of the 4-star demon beast. The expressions of contestant number 80 and contestant number 76, who were affected by pride, changed drastically. Contestant number 76 controlled his urge to summon the second magic guide spirit at this critical moment. Contestant number 80 took out a 6-star magic guide spirit card. However, his Steel Drill Snake didn't last until he finished Summon Sacrifice. After Dake noticed his intention, it immediately ordered the demon beasts to attack the Steel Drill Snakes and kill one of them. Points +1. The names of the contestants who killed the Steel Drill Snake in a short time jumped to the top of the rankings. Dake Diming's first year stood out among the second year and third year. However, after the students saw his name, they weren't that surprised. If it's Dimung, it's still acceptable. Most of the students who heard about him had the same attitude. However, the audience who noticed this name for the first time were shocked. However, the pace of the qualifier battle was unexpectedly fast. Just as the audience was shocked, they saw the rankings change again. Points +1 contestant number 70 SIXS, Horsehead Shield Guardian, and contestant number 80's, Steel Drill Snakes, were both killed. After the two contestants regained their senses, they chose to stop summoning to stop their losses. The rules of the qualifier battle determined the feasibility of this action. If they continued to summon, they would only be giving away points. Contestant number 76, who lost a magic guide spirit, had negative points. Contestant number 80, who lost 2 magic guide spirits in a row, had 2 points deducted. Dake, who obtained 3 points in a short time, had already started summoning its third magic guide card. A holy sword that emitted a holy aura appeared in the hands of the demon beast. Dake Diming's initial summoning was completed. The great demon with the holy sword would eventually become the Grim Reaper that harvested souls. The 4-star magic guide spirit, the demon beast, had a basic attack of 2,000 points. After equipping the single scabbard, its attack skyrocketed by 1,200 points, reaching a terrifying 3,200 points. Together with the discounted combo slash and sword dance, its attack power could be increased to the maximum, allowing it to unleash its strongest attack at a critical moment. The Holy Sword's name was indeed extraordinary. That is, the appearance of the single scabbard caused a trace of its aura to leak out slightly. White Gouda, who was the most sensitive to this, suddenly turned his head with a trace of surprise in his eyes. He smelled a trace of the Holy Sword. aura from the direction of his gaze. This trace of aura was quickly drowned in the surging magic waves. White Gouda turned his head with a little confusion. However, this momentary distraction caused him to pay a heavy price. Deanna, who didn't care about martial ethics, had already ordered the spirit bear to launch an inhumane sneak attack on his giant monster. The demon beast, who had finally obtained the holy sword's ownership, was completely overwhelmed by the emotions of ecstasy. Although it couldn't fully display the power of the holy sword, the feeling of controlling the holy sword of the Diru beast made it even more excited. It followed the orders given by Dake and began to slaughter the low-star magic guide spirits nearby. After contestant number 76 and number 80 stopped summoning, contestant number 75's magic guide spirit naturally became the target of the demon beast. It was a 3-star magic guide spirit similar to the horse-headed shield warrior, which was good at defense. But in front of the demon beast that had obtained the single scabbard's support, the 3-star magic guide spirit's solid defense was like paper and was easily torn apart. Under the horrified gaze of the third-year student, the demon beast that killed his magic guide spirit turned around and laughed evilly, waving its holy sword to kill its next target. Points +1 Dake, who was quite confident in the demon beast's ability, raised his head to look at the contestant rankings on the big screen after completing the 3 consecutive summons. No one would go all out in the qualifier. His tactic was to harvest the lives of low-star magic guide spirits at the beginning of the qualifier battle, to ensure that he had enough basic points. Then he would look at the rankings to decide whether to continue summoning. In the qualifier battle mode, the result of summoning a weaker magic guide spirit was points -1. If it was too dazzling, it would inevitably be attacked by some of the contestants. Among the magic guide spirits in his hands, only the demon beast could easily escape from that kind of siege. Other than the demon beast, even the Diru beast couldn't withstand the siege of many magic guide spirits. At this moment in the contestant rankings, his name was unsurprisingly in the top 10. This was considered quite good in the qualifier battle, where there were nearly 60 third-year students participating. But this was only the beginning. Dake turned to look at the demon beast. With this look, his brows furrowed. The demon beast was actually restrained. The red and blue magic guide spirits stood on both sides. They released red and blue light chains at the same time, forming a red and blue light prison that locked the demon beast in the air. He's being targeted? Dake was slightly surprised. Then he looked at the owners of the 2 magic guide spirits. He's looking over. Contestant number 74, Oligo Ruther, broke out in cold sweat. Because number 74's action of jumping over 2 people to attack number 77 might be too abrupt, he didn't summon his magic guide spirit to attack Dake Dimming at the beginning. However, with this delay, he found that Dake Dimming actually took the initiative to attack. This made him quite surprised and pleasantly surprised, because in this case, it was logical for him to resist. But even so, after being stared at by Dake, he still felt nervous. He clearly didn't do anything out of the ordinary, but he felt very guilty. Ruther tried his best not to look over and focused his attention on the field. His 2 magic guide spirits were both 3-star and super type. Because they were refined with the same materials, they unexpectedly obtained a combined sure-kill skill. The combined sure-kill skill of the 2 magic guide spirits could even bind a second-tier magic guide spirit. As long as the obviously threatening devil was bound, he believed that as long as the contestants around him didn't have any brains, they would choose to attack the demon beast. 2-in-1-4000/12,000. It's tiring to send lanterns up the mountain during the Lantern Festival. I'll update tomorrow morning. Chapter 381. In that case, he could use others to kill the fiend. Dake Dimmung would not be able to tell that he was targeting him. Perfect. Ruther gradually calmed down. As long as he killed the fiend, Dake Dimmung's combat power would be damaged. If he could not get out of the game because of that, he could naturally ask the president for credit. As expected, contestant number 75, who had just had a magic elf killed by the fiend, immediately summoned a new magic elf. The new magic elf looked like a morning glory, but its roots were as thick as a bucket and its flower petals were shining like metal. It was a 3-star, grass-type magic elf, Battery Flower. Card name, Battery Flower website. https://m, Vipcanchu. VIP type, elf card. Level, ******. Race, plant attribute, grass type. Magic power, 900. Attack, 1700. Defense, 200. Ultimate skill, photosynthetic cannon. It was a blue card with only one ultimate skill. Its magic power was weak, and its defense was basically negligible. Its mobility was almost zero. However, its basic attack power was 200 points higher than the top level. As a 3-star magic elf card, the Battery Flower's specialty was very prominent, which was strong attack. The photosynthetic cannon that was shot out from the Morning Glory barrel was very powerful. Each shot of the photosynthetic cannon consumed 300 points of magic power. Even some of the second-tier magic cards might not be able to withstand the impact of the cannon. Facing the fiend that was bound by the red and blue light prison, contestant number 75 chose to summon the most aggressive magic elf immediately. Contestant number 75 was not the only one. Contestants number 72 and 70 on Ruther's left also turned around. They had no grudges against the fiend, but they did not mind hitting it when it was down and eliminating the nearby threat at this critical moment. Almost at the same time, the 3 contestants' magic elf released their ultimate skills under the command of the enchanter. Contestant number 75's Battery Flower was the main attacker. The photosynthetic cannon that was released from its horn was somewhat similar to the sun's blazing flames. When Ruther saw Battery Flower move, he calmed down even more. If the cannon flower's photosynthetic cannon could hit the fiend, it would be severely injured even if it did not die. However, just as he was about to rejoice, he suddenly heard a calm voice from his right. Demon Beast Sword Dance. The demonic beast that was trapped in the light prison did not panic at all. It looked at the magic guiding fairies that were gradually approaching it, and the smile on its face grew wider and wider. At this moment, the evil demonic beast spread its arms and pulled out its sword from its sheath. It used its right claw to hold the sword, imitating the movements that the Delu beast had experimented in the dormitory. It placed the purplish-white sword in front of its body, pointing the sword at the center of its brows. Then, it suddenly let out an explosive roar and swept the longsword to the right at a speed that seemed slow but was actually fast, drawing an arc. When the sword was slashed out, a violent air current appeared in the air. The airflow gradually increased and wrapped around his entire body. It moved its feet and swung its sword in the air. In the blink of an eye, it was pushed forward. The sound of a storm rose. The airflow that wrapped around its body followed its right arm and swirled around the holy sword in its right hand, even though it was unable to unleash the upper limit of the sword dance. But now that it was successfully released, the lower limit of 50% was enough. With the help of the sword dance, the attack power of the next sword could reach 4,200. 4,200 attack power. In terms of value, it was even equivalent to the basic attack of an 8 or 9-star magic guiding fairy. Although it was only equivalent to a normal attack without a sure kill skill, it was a real blow to a first-tier magic guiding fairy. When the light ball of the photosynthetic cannon shot over, the demonic beast swept its sword across like a peacock spreading its tail. In an instant, the airflow that wrapped around the sword turned into sword energy and swept out in all directions. There weren't too many fancy things in it. The red and blue light prison that bound it, the photosynthetic cannon that shot over rapidly, and the long-range sure-kill skills of the other 2 magic guiding fairies. All of them were destroyed by this ordinary sword strike. The sword energy that swept out like a wind blade easily tore through the defense of the 5 magic guiding fairies. Their corpses turned into magic starlight at the same time, slowly rising like fireflies in the night. Points +5. The scene that happened in the corner of the arena did not attract much attention. However, Dake Diming's ranking had risen to 3rd place. The demonic beast, which had obtained 9 points not long after the start of the game, did not even look at Luther and the others who were in a daze. It only flapped its wings and charged towards the next magic guiding fairy. The sword that was in the sword dance state just now not only killed the 5 magic guiding fairies, but it also made it bloodthirsty. The demonic nature that had been suppressed for a long time was gradually stimulated. It stuck out its tongue and licked the corner of its mouth. A deep blood-red color appeared in its eyes. Freedom City. Dual Branch Hall. Room 1. City Lord Munterfolly observed Dake dimming through Principal Aerdiai's magic. While she was slightly shocked, her brows gradually furrowed. Aerdiai, what's with this devil species? That's Dake Diming's familiar. Principal Aerdiai said casually. City Lord Munterfolly's doubts did not disappear. Using Curse Cage to seal a familiar and obtain a magic guiding fairy card? How did its form change come about? Principal Aerdiai said. You guessed it. It's Curse Cage. As for its form change, it's the result of Diming's personal research. Personal research. City Lord Munterfolly immediately said. I'm not doubting your words, but it's really not something that our vet or someone else researched and taught to him? Principal Aerdiai smiled. I don't think so. Seeing Principal Aerdiai's stubborn look, City Lord Munterfolly knew that she would not be able to get anything out of him. However, she was not only concerned about this. I remember that familiars are summoned by the Academy card. It's closely related to a person's magic power, knowledge, personality, and other factors. To put it simply, familiars are the embodiment of a person's inner qualities. What is the heart of a person who has a familiar as a little devil? Can I trust him? Principal Aerdiai said. This has nothing to do with the heart. I don't want to listen to your nonsense. City Lord Munterfolly directly interrupted her and then muttered. I'll use my own eyes to see. Aurora, watch carefully. A woman can't be hung up on a tree, especially when the core of the tree might have already decayed. Aurora sat upright in her seat, but she was curiously looking at the sword in the demon beast's hand. After all, it was only a projection. She could not feel the trace of holy sword aura that leaked out from the single scabbard. However, special things would always spontaneously attract attention. When she heard her mother's words, she hurriedly made a sound of acknowledgement. City Lord Munterfolly looked at her obedient daughter, and was still worried. No matter how bad the rumors about the Duke's son were, there was still a limit. However, if his heart was like a demon's, then it was on a completely different level. In this situation, the more outstanding he appeared, the more vigilant he was. Perhaps she should have found a chance to see for herself before Aurora entered the school. Instead of blindly believing that no matter how much Arvette spoiled her child, she would not raise that kind of child. While City Lord Munterfolly was deeply worried about this, the Valkyrie, Dake's mother, was completely immersed in her son's amazing performance. City Lord Munterfolly was not an archmage, but a magus warrior who had half changed her class. She was bound by her old beliefs and was biased against demons, but Arvette was not like that. She cheered for her son like a normal mother, waving her right hand with all her might as she tightly held the model of the Diru beast. It was indeed easy to draw a D-grade Diru beast. She had already drawn a few and was prepared to gather a dozen to fill a circle. He's even more powerful than he was on Halloween. Third Princess Anchi held her chin and said softly. Second Princess Anna didn't care at all. We will also become powerful. Claire completely saw the scene of the demon beast releasing the sword dance. She only felt that the sword in the demon beast's hand gave her an extremely unbalanced feeling. Amidst the imbalance, there was a vague sense of familiarity. What kind of sword is that? What else can it be? A holy sword. Yelvette suddenly stopped and replied casually. Claire was slightly startled and said in surprise, A holy sword? Arvette said casually. A holy sword is not something unique. What's wrong with my baby having one? Claire. But he doesn't have the talent of a hero. Arvette. Who told you that only heroes can use a holy sword? Claire's expression froze. There was indeed someone sitting in front of her who had broken the norm. But Dake Dimming, Dake, do your best. Deanna, do your best. Luosi shouted with all her might. The first-year students of the Aristocrats Academy seemed to have recognized her as a cheerleader, and also shouted with her in unison. Not far away, Panduola narrowed his eyes as he observed the demon beast holding the single scabbard. He had a new understanding of the strength of Dake's magic elf. While they were cheering for Dake, of course, There were also people who didn't want him to do well. What's going on? Can't he do well? The president of the Aristocrats History Research Society, Angus Jeffrey, was gritting his teeth. Oligo Ruther did indeed cause trouble for Dake Dimming as he wished, but now, it seemed like he was sending himself to death. The few contestants who took advantage of the situation to attack were also trash. There was obviously a third-year student among them, but they couldn't even deal with a first-year student. When he mentioned the third-year student, Jeffrey thought of that trash Mike Owen. If Owen could perform better in this audition, it wasn't impossible for him to accept him again. It was really uncomfortable to have no one to use. In the circular duel arena, Mike Owen commanded his magic elves with ease, continuously reaping the lives of the low-star magic elves. He didn't look for Dake Dimming as Jeffrey wished, and he didn't even look. The winner was king, and the loser was dust. The winner had everything. For this Easter Duel Festival, Mike Owen's goal was very simple: to win. All of a sudden, a figure slowly rose from the center of the circular duel arena. A melody like the sound of a clear spring echoed. The icy cold wind was swirling around. An extremely cold aura radiated out. In the clear and melodious voice, a terrifying snowstorm blew in the center of the arena. Dake Dimming suddenly raised its head and looked at the center of the arena. It saw a rare human magic elf wearing a pure white gauze dress and an ice crystal crown floating in the air. Under countless gazes, it raised its scepter high, and the crystal ball at the top of the scepter released an icy blue aurora. Under its control, the ice energy formed a vortex visible to the naked eye. A violent snowstorm radiated out with it as the center, and a huge and terrifying snow tornado rose up. The contestants with magic elves nearby suddenly had a change in expression. They hurriedly shouted, trying to make their magic elves retreat. But in the blink of an eye, the snowstorm had already formed. The surrounding magic elves were enveloped by the snowstorm and disappeared in a white mist. The huge snow tornado attacked, and a large number of magic elves were sucked into the tornado, continuously draining their lives. The points behind a certain name on the big screen were constantly being updated with a skyrocketing trend. Winnie Scatty's name shot to the top in an instant. 6-star ice element human species. Ice Chamber Girl. Dake instantly recognized the incomparably beautiful Ice Chamber Girl in the air. As one of the few magic elves with a popularity rating of A, Ice Chamber Girl's appearance was a huge bonus. Just like the A-grade model Pure White Dragon Maiden in Dake's hands, because of its beauty characteristic, it was extremely popular. And the owner of Ice Chamber Girl was the third-year Magic Academy's Winnie Scarty, the descendant of the Sage of Winter. If he wanted to win this Easter Duel Festival, this senior sister whom he had only met a few times was a hurdle that he had to cross. Dake Dimming felt the pressure. At this moment, the demon beast that had once again harvested a few low-star magic elves suddenly felt a chill down its spine, as if it was being targeted by a poisonous snake. Ice Chamber Girl's AoE Surekill skill attracted the attention of people and magic elves, but the demon beast was naturally alert and immediately sensed the danger. It almost subconsciously swung the single scabbard behind it. But what came from behind wasn't an unstoppable attack, but a pile of pitch-black mud. Not good. The demon beast's heart skipped a beat. It discovered that after the single scabbard stabbed into the mud, it was immediately blocked, as if the entire sword was stuck. And that pile of mud suddenly expanded, turning into a huge mouth that swallowed it. Oh! In the blink of an eye, the tall demon beast was swallowed by the mud along with its sword. And the owner of this mud, the third-year Noble Academy's Thomas Brown, did not let down his guard. Thomas Brown, who was also a third-year like Mike Owen, had a father who was under Count Jeffrey's command and could be considered a lackey. Therefore, he was bound to Angus Jeffrey's worship from the beginning. Thinking about the problem from Jeffrey's point of view was easy for him. Under such circumstances, Mike Owen was his competitor. Now that Mike Owen was marginalized, it was time for him to fight for the position. Creating some substantial trouble for Dake Dimming and pleasing Jeffrey was a way to replace Owen's position in President Jeffrey's heart. Recently, Dake Dimming had obviously become a sharp thorn in President Jeffrey's heart. Even if it was not to gather forces and strengthen the club, President Jeffrey still wanted to teach him a lesson. Thomas Brown was a loyal follower of his orders. Card name, Swamp Monster. Type, Elf card. Level, ********. Race, Elemental. Attribute, Ground/Poison Magic. 1500 Attack, 1600. Defense, 1400. Ultimate skills, Swamp Trap, Nibble Technique, Magical Swamp Seal. The orange card with a total of 3 ultimate skills, Swamp Monster, was one of Thomas Brown's trump cards. Although its magic attack and defense were only at the pinnacle of 3 stars, its 3 sure-kill skills were very powerful and could be used with ease. Relying on the sudden sneak attack, Swamp Monster successfully swallowed the demon beast into its stomach. The Swamp Monster's defense was not high, but its characteristics as an elemental allowed it to be immune to physical piercing to a certain extent. Whether it was the death claw of the demon beast or the slashing of the scabbard, it was difficult to cause any real damage to it. Once the demon beast was swallowed, Swamp Monster could use its ultimate skill, Magical Swamp Seal, to completely seal the demon beast inside. After that, it could use Nibble Technique to suck the demon beast dry of its magic power. Instant transmission failed? The message from Demon Beast's magic card shocked Dake. He could clearly feel that the demon beast was a little shaken after instant transmission failed. However, he still looked calm on the surface. There are 2 possibilities. The ultimate skill is sealed, or the space is sealed. Judging from the way this swamp monster behaved, the latter is more likely. Since teleportation is not allowed, I'll break the seal. Dake suddenly shouted, "Demon Beast, Razor Wings!" The demon beast that was about to try Deathclaw immediately switched to Razor Wings. The razor-like beam released from its wings cut open the body of the swamp monster in the blink of an eye. Magical Swamp Seal was opened a gap. Before the wound of the swamp monster closed, the demon beast's eyes flashed and it immediately used instant transmission. This time, instant transmission was no longer blocked. The evil demonic beast suddenly appeared on top of the swamp monster. Its eyes flashed with bloody light, and the anger of being imprisoned appeared between its eyebrows. However, as a magus, Dake would not let his emotions affect him because of such a small encounter. After a quick analysis, he immediately shouted, "Fly!" The demon beast suddenly spread its wings and flew up into the sky against the urge to attack immediately. Several attacks missed because of this. The nearby contestants who failed to hit the demon beast while it was down immediately ordered their magic fairy to attack other magic fairy. A tall tree attracts the wind. The demon beast swept all the way and was targeted by many people. However, its performance was quite troublesome, and there was no information about it in the regular illustration handbook. The contestants chose to avoid it out of caution. After the failure of this probing attack, he would most likely be even more cautious the next time. At this time, the swamp monster had fallen to the ground and turned into a swamp. Cold sweat seeped out of Thomas Brown's back. He never expected the demon beast to have such a powerful magic sure-kill skill. The swamp monster was so close to being insta-killed. Now, it could only turn into Swamp Trap and lick its wounds. However, if the demon beast attacked it at this time, it would definitely be swallowed by the Swamp Trap. The demon beast in the air glanced at the swamp on the ground, but it had already calmed down. "I'm not stupid," it muttered to itself. It muttered in its heart as it turned around and rushed to where there were more prey. Continuing the little demon beast's cunning, under the demon beast's ferocious appearance was a delicate mind. It was just that the effect of pride would sometimes make it too arrogant. However, it calmed down. It would not be lured by such an obvious trap. The entire arena was filled with little cuties of low stars. It did not want to waste time on that stinky swamp monster. The summoning of high star magic fairy would usually use a sacrificial summoning spell. And to sacrifice, there had to be a sacrifice. If one wanted to use a low star magic fairy as a sacrifice, they would have to bear the risk of being hunted. Of course, the mages could also choose to use the usual summoning method and spend more than a minute to summon a 4-star magic fairy of the second tier. As for a 5-star magic fairy that required more than 10 minutes to summon, it was not too suitable. In fact, Thomas Brown's swamp monster had been summoned in this way. Dake had also been looking for an opportunity to summon a 4-star magic fairy. It was a pity that it was not easy to summon Magician's Secretary in this kind of chaotic battle. Otherwise, he would only need to watch the battle and let Magician's Secretary do the work. However, according to the current situation, Demon Beast is enough. Dake did not pay attention to Thomas Brown's swamp monster anymore. In this kind of chaotic battle, it was normal to encounter any kind of ambush. Only people with ulterior motives would pay special attention. The continuous increase in his points caused his ranking to fluctuate between 3rd and 6th place. Before the end of the 30 minutes of the competition, relying on Demon Beast was enough to hold the situation. In comparison, some of the other contestants were not so convenient. They needed to control their magic power better. After 3 to 5 minutes of no consumption time, they had to change their magic fairies in time to ensure that their magic power consumption was within their limits. Although mages had a lower threshold than mages, in the end, it was still a profession that relied on talent. Mages with mediocre talent and magic power had to spend more energy to make up for this convenient flaw. The energy they needed to spend was several times more. The massacre of the Demon Beast continued for more than 10 minutes. During this time, it encountered many high-star and powerful magic fairies that targeted it more than once, but it chose to avoid them all. If it could not avoid them, it would use instant teleportation to change the battlefield. In a coincidental encounter, it once again bumped into Thomas Brown's swamp monster. Then, Thomas casually used Razor Wings, which had its cooldown reset, and accidentally sent it to the afterlife. Thus, the Demon Beast's thoughts were clear. In this kind of environment, even if Thomas Brown wanted to target the Demon Beast, it would be very difficult, because it was also the prey of a stronger opponent. After Ice Room Girl's Blizzard Tornado, another third-year student summoned a high-star magic fairy and used a large-scale Surekill skill to complete a wave of harvest. The competition for the top 8 rankings became more and more intense. About 20 minutes later, the low-star magic fairies in the field had almost been cleared. The remaining green ones were all second-tier or higher magic fairies, and the originally slightly crowded field was now empty. Most of the contestants who focused on participation had already chosen to give up at this time. Even if they didn't want to give up, the negative points behind their names forced them to give up. Dake had looked for Deanna's name on the big screen, but even Deanna had already fallen to an unknown corner. The contestants of the first years disappeared without a trace. But Deanna was actually in a good mood. After all, her points were positive. Among a large number of contestants with negative points, she still belonged to the winning side. It's a victory if you don't lose points. White Gouda, who had provided her with a large number of positive points and negative points, was now twitching the corner of her mouth. She hadn't found a chance to use the last Holy Sword curse in her hand. Sigh. AI Ma and Sarah sighed one after another and chose to give up. The materials obtained from the dungeon allowed them to successfully maintain their positive points, but that was it. Under the hunting of the top students of the 3rd and 2nd years, they had already done their best. In order to comfort themselves, even if they lost, it was still honorable. The first-year students who had stopped one after another naturally focused their attention on the only active first-year student in the field, Dake Deming. As expected of Dake, Teddy Dolong didn't know how many times he sighed. Deanna was also silently cheering for Dake in her heart. The chaotic battle of the qualifiers continued until now. Although the situation was getting more and more intense, the front row was already clear. The descendant of the Winter Sage, Winnie Scardy, was in first place. The third-year student of the noble house, the son of a meritorious baron, Stuart Phone, was in second place. The third-year student of the Fool's House, the mixed blood who was born in the slums, Tom Nixon, was in third place. After that, it was the competition between the 10 to 20 contestants. Dake Deming was in sixth place and could be surpassed by the latecomers at any time. The lead that he had built up by bullying the babies in the early stages was quickly being caught up. It seems that I can't pass the level in the last 10 minutes with only the demonic beast. Dake's mental power was gradually focused. His fingers moved in his card pack and finally gave up on the Diru beast. He was ready to let the lion beast out to see the world. The lion beast had never been on the battlefield before and needed to experience it. Also, he could more or less feel that the demonic beast was about to arrive. Many of the third-year students were already looking at the demonic beast with impatient eyes. The demonic beast, that appeared and disappeared unpredictably like a loach in the duel arena, and constantly slaughtered the babies, had already received countless malice. It was time to change to a magic guide sprite, and let the righteous big brother lion beast wash the eyes of the seniors. Dake silently began to summon the ball sea lion and eagle wrestler, preparing to sacrifice them as sacrifices. Probably because he hadn't done anything since the start of the competition for nearly 20 minutes. His surroundings were empty, and there were no magic guide sprites around him at all. This time, the sacrificial summoning went very smoothly. The lion beast that emerged from the sacrificial summoning array knelt on one knee with a righteous face. The appearance of such a temperamental magic guide sprite attracted Dake Diming's attention once again. In particular, the city lord of the Freedom City, Mordilfully, was instantly attracted by this warrior with a courageous temperament. Tall and mighty, overflowing with dominance, full of justice, steadfast and gentle. No matter which characteristic it was a good target for City Lord Mordilfully. Compared to the demonic beast, this lion beast was simply the other extreme. This made City Lord Mordilfully couldn't help but think of her deceased husband. Although her husband wasn't tall, in terms of justice and gentleness, he was extremely similar to this lion beast. But why could a magic guide sprite give people such an impression the moment they saw it? As a warrior, her intuition made City Lord Mordilfully suddenly come back to her senses. She looked at the lion beast with doubt in her eyes. Mother, don't you think that the sword in the demonic beast's hand is more compatible with this big lion? Aurora's casual words. Her gaze became serious. If the Dilu beast's courageous aptitude was reserved and deep, then the lion beast's courageous aptitude was exposed and flamboyant. The sure kill skill, heart of justice, made it seem as if it had a halo of justice. Even if it just stood there, it would make people unconsciously feel a sense of trust. Do you want to practice? A voice suddenly sounded from a distance and entered Dake's ears. Dake turned his head and saw the second-year Noble Academy senior, Mary Bond, reaching out her hand and provoking him with her index finger. Mary, who had a single ponytail and looked clean and valiant, was somewhat famous in the academy. However, Dake's impression of her was still from the Halloween event when she kicked Seakeet's three-eyed squid away. That kind of delicate violence, the way she handled things cleanly, and the confidence in her own strength were all very eye-catching. You're a combat-type magic guide sprite, right? Mary saw Dake turn around and smiled with her arms crossed. The magic guide sprite standing beside her was a tiger man in green clothes. 4in1-12000/12,000 Shark. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.